Redditors who are married to Karens, how is it like? Not married to a Karen, but married someone with a Karen for a sister. Sil is the freaking worst. I hate more than anything going out to dinner with her, listening to her order food, and talk to the servers. Holidays are also terrible. She sends out long lists of expected gifts list. She celebrates every holiday and birthday specifically for presents even when it not appropriate. Funny thing is, one time I was away from the dinner table when the bill came and Sil waited for me to return to pay the bill by actually handing it to me. She didn't give it to her sibling / myso or pay her half, but expressly handed it to me to pay. By the way, her husband is an idiot and they are a match made in heaven. Edit. I'm sorry to disappoint everyone, but yes, I did pay. There are many reasons as to why, but the biggest one is that it got me out of the restaurant faster. Also, it helps me control the tip. Another time we went to a family brunch where the bill was split. Karen still waited to see what other people tipped, so she could lower the overall tip percentage for the waitress to what Sil thought was deserving. We didn't know this until afterwards, when she bragged about it later, so no one even knew to stop her. And she is invited to these family meals because she has 2 children we want a relationship with, so she has that emotional blackmail card. Not married 4 years of a toxic relationship though. I broke up with her on Monday, again. We are kinda faked financially because of this lockdown, so we are just feeling things out for a month before we decide for sure. This cycle is on repeat. I constantly have to cut her off and speak over her because of the way she treats people. Waiters, sales assistants, gym staff, neighbors, landlords, randoms we meet in bars, etc. Note, we were both waiters at the beginning of our relationship, so she has worked in the industry, but still lacks empathy. She blames the waiter if something is out of stock etc. My second major issue. We are both English second language teachers. She teaches kindergarten, while I teach high school. Now that we are working from home, I hear how she speaks to her students, and it's really opened up another aspect of her personality that I don't like. She will berate a student for not understanding instead of evaluating her ability to explain cheating on 3-year-olds in their second language. Doesn't fly with me. A lot of her behavior stems from a self-defense mechanism due to insecurity, but that's not an excuse. She doesn't realize how mean she is to people, including myself. I'm a people pleaser that would rather sacrifice my own comfort than someone else's. She expects me to be an asshole to people because I'm a biggish guy with tattoos. I don't exactly look soft. It's toxic as hell. Please help. PS. The setch is so good it rivals most born easily. Edit. This comment is blowing up. I appreciate all the objective advice. It's noted. I do research a lot of self-help and am aware of the codependency and enabling traits in my situation. For those making assumptions based on one comment, don't be a Karen. Not married but dated a male Karen for 8 years. He was a semi-successful business owner who was twice my age, and I was young and dumb for a lack of a better word. The gist of our relationship was him trying to take over every part of my life. For instance, he would order for me at restaurants and would dissuade me if I wanted to try something new. If I had a problem with something, it would be brushed off, but if he had a problem, then he had to talk to a manager. Not knowing any better, I just thought he was very particular and even started copying some of his tendencies, like speaking up when I felt I wasn't getting the right service. When I was out on my own, I realized who he was when we were flying back from Vegas and our luggage was heavier than when we flew in. Obviously we bought extra things which made up for the weight difference, so as he demanded to know an explanation from the check-in clerk as to why, if it was the same luggage, would it somehow weigh more. I innocently answered that it must have been the extra shoes and clothes. He was quiet and paid up. Later he told me to not to do that again, as he knew the reason why the luggage was heavier. He was just trying to get away with not paying. At that moment a bulb went off in my head. This man who'd spent $1,500 on a stripper for his friend was making an already stressful job more stressful for the clerk in order to avoid paying $60. We broke up soon after, and I checked myself on the Karen tendencies he drubbed off on me. My mom is a Karen. Not fun. I think she was part of the reason the girl I loved left, because whenever she was around, my mom behaved much better and put on a nice face. We argued frequently about my relationship with my mom. Hurts a lot. Don't think I can fully let this one go. Edit 1. I apologize for not replying to very many of you. The end of the semester is upon me, and papers and such are taking up a large amount of my time. Edit 2. I love my mom very much, and she is generally a very nice person. I've spent a good while trying to put it to words accurately, but it's difficult. Everything is very minor and very subtle, but it's constant all the time. It's not what she does, it's how she does it sort of thing. She doesn't try to hide her behavior when in public. She just tries to put her best face forward when around others like everyone else does. I don't know if she is aware of what she does when at home, because it is so minor and subtle, but I have a difficult time believing that, since it is constant and other reasons. Edit 3. My most upvoted Reddit. Wow. Edit 4. To those concerned for me in some way, thank you, it means a lot. Only one of my friends knows the specifics of my relationship with my mom, so it's nice to receive support. To alleviate some of your worries, she doesn't control my life or actions. The pain she causes is dwarfed greatly by everything she has done for me. Without her I wouldn't have made it where I'm today, and I'm extremely thankful and lucky to have her in my life despite the pain. I do not think I will cut her out of my life. Less frequent contact helps, but she is not so great a terror that no contact ever is needed. I look forward to seeing her spoil my grandchildren, and know she will trust me to raise them, not try to take over and do it herself. Edit 5. The pain of losing the girl I loved in a way I didn't think I was able to love is the greatest pain in my life. Thank you all for your kind words and sympathy. Was married to a male Karen. Everything, and I mean everything, could set him off. We were at a local tap room and his iPhone automatically connected to the Wi-Fi. Keep in mind, he had full bars on our cell service. The Wi-Fi was being wonky and wasn't working. The manager, super nice guy, comes over and asks how we are doing, while he washes some glasses in the dish pit on the other side of the bar. The following conversation ensues. Keep in mind, my husband is super irritated at this made up problem, because the cell service is working just fine, and he can literally just turn off the Wi-Fi. Husband, your Wi-Fi is faking trash. Manager, I'm sorry. We recently upgraded our internet, and Cox is sending us a new modem. It's supposed to be here this week. Husband, if you say you have Wi-Fi, you should make sure it actually works. Manager, I know. I'm sorry. I'd be happy to restart the modem to see if that helps. Husband then ignores him and continues to talk under his breath about a made up issue. This was my life for almost 5 years. The sense of entitlement was frustrating enough in public, but more so at home. I had apologized to more servers, retail workers, neighbors, and random people in public for him in 5 years than the rest of my life outside of him. You know what? Now that I'm talking about it, maybe he's not so much a male Karen. He's more like a piece of shit. Not married to a Karen, but my mom is a Karen whose name is actually Karen. Simply put, I haven't seen her in over a year, because I couldn't take it anymore. Living with her was just an exhausting nightmare. Karen's world revolves around Karen. Nobody else's issues matter. If you tell her that you had a bad day, she'll give you 20 reasons why her day was worse. You worked 60 hours this week. Well, when she was your age, she would work 80. You're in the hospital after having major surgery. She has a pinched nerve in her arm, which is somehow worse. Your boyfriend cheated on you. She couldn't even begin to tell you about all the heartbreak she's experienced in her life. She complains left and right about anything and everything. If you're taking a week break after just getting back from college, she'll ask why you haven't gotten a job yet and claim you're lazy. If you're out to eat at a restaurant, the food is always too cold, or too burnt, or too salty. You can only ever go to the places she wants to go to, because everything else is crap. My entire graduation dinner she complained about how cold the food was. She thrives in getting attention and constantly seeks it, but she has very few actual friends. Facebook is her lifeblood, and she's always looking to start something on there. She's the queen of sharing uninformed, misguided, conservative propaganda, which always starts fights in her comments. Also, If a tragedy happens in the family, like the passing of my teenage cousin, she'll make a big scene on Facebook and expect condolences from anyone and everyone, and makes note of the people who don't give her what she wants. Don't even get me started on the blatant racism. I've heard everything from, watch out for black people on the subway. They'll try to take your purse, to it should be illegal for those Muslims to cover their faces. You should be able to see someone's face. One of my best friends is black, and she once told me, he's one of the good ones. They should all be like him. Minor, but the house always has to be spotless. You have a shirt on your bedroom floor? Pick up. You kids are all slobs. We have people coming over. No we don't, and even if we do, why would they be going in my bedroom? Her house is her house, and she'll let you know. Any object she has spent money on doesn't belong to you, it belongs to her. She also spends way too much money on home decor like oriental rugs, furniture, etc., but then complains about how she has no money. TLDR, my mother is a Karen who is actually named Karen. Living with her is a nightmare. And before anyone asks, yes, my dad is divorced from her best friend married a Karen. This woman is a whole different level of Karen. He makes a large 6-digit salary, but has to work cycle shift away from home. She has the option to move from home, so they can live as a family, but refuses because she has what she calls a career. She sells scents and works a clerk job at an hour office. They have 2 kids. She can't handle them. She makes him drive home from work every day, so she can work out for 30 minutes in the evening. It's a 7 hours commute. He had to buy another vehicle because he couldn't take the company vehicle back and forth. So expensive and dangerous, there's too many things. Here's some. When she's working at home he has to leave the house with the kids and can't come back until she says it's okay. Insane spending habits on unnecessary stuff. Amazon, Scentsy and other MLM products. Any negative things that happens in her life is his fault, and he has to fix it immediately, no matter the cost. She texts and calls him every 10 minutes at work to complain about him being away from home and how the kids drive her crazy. She made him buy her a luxury camper, $40k, so she can visit him at work. Came one time. She puts the kids in daycare, even though it costs them more than she financially makes. Wants more kids, wants huge renovations done, but refuses to watch the kids while he does them. He has to watch them while working. Nothing gets done quick, and that gives her anxiety and stress. Makes him 10 job fairs in hopes that he'll find a job making just as much money. It won't happen, but he does it anyway to please the demands. It frustrates me because my time with him has literally become therapy sessions where he vents for hours. It's brutal and I hate that he tolerates it. The one that gets me the most is that she'd rather pretend to have a really good career than move with him so they can live a great family lifestyle. They'd save lots of money and they would be a much better parenting team. Scylla's a Karen, and her name is very close to Karen. One of her most recent masterpieces, her daughter, my niece, had a big choir performance one night. My family, her family, and my Phil and Mill were going to meet for dinner and then go to the show. My neighbor owns a very nice Italian restaurant in town, and he arranged for us to have a big table ready when we got there. We, my family of 4, are halfway to the restaurant when my wife decides to check in with her sister with a text message. So, Karen immediately calls back and casually says she's running late. She is always late, and that it would be best if we drove to their house to pick them up. To this day I don't understand how that will help us when she's already late and we had a rather tight window to have dinner, but Karen throws a sheet fit when my wife pushes back, so we turn around, pick them up, and drive to the restaurant. We sit down, and she scans the menu, asks the waitress questions, tells her a couple times she's not ready to order and needs a few minutes. Meanwhile we are all openly reminding her that we are on a tight window. Doesn't matter. Karen will not be rushed. It should be noted that my neighbor's restaurant has a single page menu that doesn't change, and Karen has been to this restaurant many times. By the time she decides what she wants to order, we realize we now will not have time to eat. She gives all sorts of shit to the waitress demanding to-go boxes for our meals that are just now being served. My neighbor then came to our table to figure out what was going on, and she immediately stood up to try to explain what was going on and threw the waitress under the bus. As we were leaving, I pull my neighbor and the waitress aside to tell them what really happened, profusely apologize, tell them it absolutely was not their fault at all. This is going to get buried, but it's a juicy one. I was married to Karen, and it was absolutely embarrassing and cost me many good friendships. I was in the military, and she would continually cause drama with the other wives, wear my rank on her sleeve, and was the first person to judge. She always had the attitude that she was better than everyone, still does from what I've heard, and flip out on servers, and I would have to straight up have to sneak tip them. Well, after a few different duty stations and a lot of burnt friendships, I was getting tired of it, and I would look forward to going on my deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. On my last one, she decides to cheat on me with my best friend, gotta love it, and I'm immediately told about it. I'm not sure if it was because I was well liked or she was well hated. Anyway, this was my thank God moment. I can be the first one in my family to get a divorce and not get judged too hard for it and end 10 years of absolute misery. So, fast forward to today, my ex-best friend, thanks for the solid dude, lol, and my ex-wife ended up getting married. But if there is one thing you don't do, it's cheat on your deployed husband. This is very poorly looked upon everyone in the military, and you'll be excommunicated by the community, and the other is start a marriage based on cheating. So, from what I heard, not that I really give a shit, is that she is divorcing him for cheating on him, and she is no longer allowed to be on the post for shacking up with another married dude while his wife was deployed. The circle of shame continues. Also, this is just the tip of the iceberg, and there were a lot more repercussions for them because of the initial instance that happened while I was deployed. Was married to one. Think they are a monster in public? Absolutely terrible at home. Bullies, nasty, cannot lose an argument. Physically and mentally abusive. Point worst thing she would do is if she had the idea I might walk out, she would physically corner me, ensure she was 1 inch from me, and scream in my face for sometimes over an hour, trying to egg me into touching her so she could call the cops on me for assault. Worst thing, I got screamed at for 2 weeks solid when she could. She rear-ended someone in her Gia tracker, poor women's Karen mobile. Shattered her grill was all. I went to a few pick and pulls to see if I could find a new grill. No Gia tracker, but found Chevy tracker grill. I bought it. I had to have permission to spend a dime, so I told her a tracker grill. I got home about same time as she did from work. I was her live-in nanny for her kids and saw it on the counter before I could debadge it and put it on her tracker with the Gia logo. 2 weeks of hell. Told her I'd take it back and get a Gia tracker one. I did. Next day take it back. I went and found the badge I saw the other day that wasn't sun faded like hers. Stuck it on the Chevy tracker grill. Installed it. Point, she had no clue, but she went on 4 days. How stupid I was to buy a Chevy grill. Obviously not the same vehicle. How she had to wait a whole extra day to be able to drive it to work. That she had to answer why she was driving my sheep box. Lol. That she had to lie about it for a second day being in the shop. That my wax wasn't good so it didn't look obvious that the grill was replaced. That I should have used the original badge so it wasn't obvious. I put original sheet badge back on. Then she beached about how sheety the old logo was. That I should have cleaned it sooner or changed it sooner, but can't change it now. To draw eyes to the too clean grill. Was my fault I couldn't buy a more worn grill. That the grill wasn't centered. It was centered. Her old wasn't. That it's my fault she drove the car. She refused to let her kids ride in the old crappy car when I shuttled them. That it's my fault we couldn't afford a second car. First 3 years of marriage refused to let me work. My fault we lived where we were. My fault she rear-ended the guy. My fault her brakes were shit. My fault that she drove the faster route I found to her work. My fault that she still worked there. My fault I didn't force her to move to San Diego. My fault I didn't make her a new child. My fault we didn't have sex often. My fault I didn't arouse her. My fault that we married too soon. My fault that her kids were only A students, not A+. My fault that I had to sleep on the couch. My fault that all the plates she threw at me broke. My fault. Point. When she couldn't win a fight, the past would win it for her. If that wouldn't win, she would get straight abusive until I would submit. After I left her, which was the second largest war and longer story, found out that she faked every male employee she worked with on business trips. And yes, Warax a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde scenario. All the way up to wedding, she was outwardly a great person. Wedding changed her into Karensaurus Rex. I have Karens for parents faking awful. I got £150 in gift vouchers from charities when I was diagnosed with cancer. So I went out and brought some decent headphones. One day they just snapped. My sister saw. All I did was bend them slightly to place on my head and they snapped. My dad was angry and the next day he grabbed my wheelchair and took me back to the shops. He made me take off my chemo cap and made me sit in my wheelchair. He wheeled me in the shop. He ended up getting into a screaming match, ordering a manager and a supervisor, and said back, "Look at her." At some point my sisters left the shop and just cringed outside. My dad wouldn't let me leave or wheel myself out. The whole time I was beet red and had my head in my hands. When they wouldn't help him, he threw the broken headphones into the metal trash can for receipts and it rattled. He stormed out calling them cunts. I looked up as I was being wheeled out and mouthed back, "I'm so sorry apostrophe. If there are any 30 to 40-year-old ladies who worked at Argus in the UK and you had a man come in with a child with cancer who was shouting about £100 headphones, I'm so sorry." Early in our marriage I started seeing some Karen tendencies in my wife. It started because companies were legitimately jerking us around on things we needed, and she was trying to be more assertive. Initially she had it compartmentalized. She'd turn it on when she needed it, and turn it off once things were getting resolved. But she started losing her ability to keep it segmented, and this entitlement mindset started bleeding into other interactions. It never got too bad, but I didn't like the direction it was headed. I finally said something one night after she'd gone into a store to return something and came back out to the car telling about how she gave the employee a talking to about how terrible the return policy was. So I just asked her, an hourly employee with no say in the matter, upheld the company policy as she was trained to do, and you thought it was appropriate to give her a talking to for that? How do you think that made her feel? What would you have done differently if you had her job? Was it worth ruining someone's day over this? Do you feel better that you made her feel bad, or worse? Is that how you want people to remember you? Or while I was circling back to the store, I parked the car and said something to the effect of, "I think you owe that woman an apology. And I think if you take a minute to think about it, you'll do the right thing." She argued with me for a few minutes because she felt like I was attacking her, but to her credit, she walked herself back in that store and stood in line for 10 minutes to apologize. That was a turning point for her, I think. Since then, even when people have legitimately screwed up, she's been much more patient, understanding, and polite. I'm grateful she was open to my critique, because I have other Karens in my extended family, and I don't know if I could be with someone like that. I had two exes that were both borderline Karens. Both extremely frustrating people. Couldn't take the blame or responsibility for anything. Still remember one of them being absolutely furious with me for not answering her calls, despite the fact her calls weren't coming through, because my workplace had no damn signal at the time. This is like 15 years ago. I had another who treated me like an absolute idiot. I used to drive to her place all the time, but when my car broke down, she came to mine, and always made a fuss about giving her gas money. I argued at first, considering I normally always pay for everything and never ask her for anything back. I figured then that giving her the gas money is also kind of a way of paying her to shut the fuck up. Turned out to be an amazing deal. She'd also make a massive scene when something didn't go her way. I still remember her screaming at her dad about something so insignificant, and I was absolutely embarrassed for her. How on earth does a grown adult think and act so damn entitled, as well as being rude? One of them was just batshit crazy too. We got engaged, no faking idea why I did, and an ex of mine I hadn't heard from for a long time asked if she could come to this big celebration we were having. I told my then girlfriend about this weird email, and she totally flipped, said you guys must be faking if she's contacting you, and then ran off. to tell my parents I'd been cheating on her. That was a big ugly faking mess to clean up. The breakups were interesting. Broke up with the first one in my car when dropping her off home after having our 500th argument of the week. It was still only Monday, too. She properly ugly cried in the car and refused to leave, coughing and spilling everything from the contents of her nose everywhere. I just stayed quiet and eventually she left. Felt like forever though. By far one of the most uncomfortable moments of my life. She later told a few of my good friends we broke up because I rapped her, so yeah. Another faking horrible mess to clean up. Even had to go to the police about that. The second girl took it better, but still made it a life's mission to rip me to pieces every time we were out with friends. We had some friends in the same circle, and she'd always be out when I was out with a particular group. Makes me so grateful for the wife I have now. I don't know what the opposite of a Karen is, but she is absolutely it. She's understanding, extremely generous, kind, caring, empathetic, sweet, considerate and respectful. I've hit the jackpot, and by God, do I know it. Not married but growing up my mom was a total Karen. Was always angry about something. Treated my dad like total garbage. Mind you, my father is the kindest man who came from nothing and has built us a life so good that even my grandkids will benefit from it. Also her and my sister used to always go at it. Screaming and yelling was the norm around my household as a child. I remember a time when I was like 10 or 11. I did something that upset my mom. Can't remember exactly what it was, and she straight up pretended I didn't exist for months. Would literally come home from school. Thankfully I rode a bike, so I didn't have to depend on her for a ride and have to wait for my dad to get home to make dinner. Eventually I learned how to make simple meals myself. She would openly talk shit about my dad and my sisters and I to her friends. I remember walking in the kitchen one time and saw her typing and email to her friends, and it was just bashing my dad and my siblings and I. I remember when we would walk by her computer she would like half shut it and give us a side eye as we were walking by and the reopen as we walked out of the room. As if we didn't all know what she was doing. Public outings generally ended in some type of drama. Whether it was between my sister and mother or just some problem my mom had in general with the venue or restaurant, you could almost always expect those to end in some sort of traumatic style. It honestly got so bad that my siblings and I at one point told our parents they should get a divorce. They never did, though as I got older things got a little better. We moved across the country because my dad was doing well and my parents were able to buy their dream house at a young age. My dad's job was in our hometown though, so he would still spend most of his time there. So basically it was just my mom and I who moved out there full time. My sisters were both moved out by this time. I was going into high school knowing no one, and my mom didn't work and didn't know anyone there yet, so I think we were forced to kind of be each other's rock. We still had our arguments and indifferences, but as time went on we got closer, but my mom still had issues with my dad and other things. About a year after I went away to college my mom got really sick. She came really close to dying. It was terrifying for my whole family, but it ended up being one of our greatest blessings. Luckily she pulled through and made a full recovery. Ever since then she has been a completely different woman. My dad and her are totally in love again. I've never seen them so happy. She never yells, screams, or really gets involved in any conflict anymore. She's become the most supportive person in my siblings and I life, and I can honestly say she is my best friend now. My whole family is closer now because of it as well. Holidays and family get-togethers went from being a total drag to my most look forward to events of the year. While unfortunate it took my mother a near-death experience to realize how good life could be if she would just change, I feel blessed for having a closer and happier family for it. I think it also allows us to really cherish our time together because it's not often we see each other anymore given our various life circumstances. But when we do it's the best time. P.S. Sorry, this is a novel. Never shared this with anyone really before. Felt good to get it off my chest. We were together for 3 years. I am 22, met her F22 in college, and we hit it off. It was great until we both decided our next and final year together would be spent in off-campus housing, which allowed me to bring my dog. It was all good for a couple of weeks until my friends started calling her Karen. It was stupid at first, but I realized as we went out more often we would never be able to sit through a full meal together without me having to persuade, more like begged, her not to try to speak to the manager. It started off as a joke to me, but over time I realized that she was being serious. I started to ask her to turn it down a notch and she seemed fine, but the next day on my way home from work I'd get a call from my mom telling me that I'm a piece of shit and that I'll never amount to anything. I was confused until she told me Karen called her and said that I'd punched her in the face and even sent a photo, which when forwarded to me was obviously fake. I confronted her when I got home and she started yelling like a maniac. She started faking calling my dad in the middle of the living room crying and saying I hit her, and I told her to get out of my house right there and not come back. That beach was toxic as hell, and for the next month I received spam from random numbers saying I'm the asshole and a piece of shit for beating her, so I posted the photo of her faking a black eye with Macute publicly with proof. Her public image disintegrated. Next day I found 2 of my car's windows broken and decided to install cameras right then. The next couple of days nothing happens, but a week after the car window incident I find my dog of 7 years and my best friend ever dead, with loads of chocolate next to him. When I get home, I check the cameras and find out she got in with a key, which scares me, because I don't know how she got it, and have him chocolate. I called the cops on her, and she was arrested, and I've since sued her for emotional trauma for $100k, presses charges, and have had my restraining order toward her granted. Going on a year now since then, and I'm going strong Karen free. I know this is for Karens but this was a Fisco Karen, and I'm glad I got out before it was too late. I'm married to a Karen. I have been for 16 years now. To best describe the experience it's like there are 2 different personalities to contend with. There's the sexy, loving mother of my daughter and the personality that overreacts to slights by staff, neighbors, strangers, fellow employees, you name it. I met some of her coworkers at a Christmas party once, and after they figured out who I was, they all seemed to apologize for my lot in life. I understand completely and just laugh. I've described some of her antics over the years to my extended family and close friends. They are convinced on being held emotionally hostage. I just laugh and agree. Sh's a beach, but sh's mine. Now, let me tell you why I love being married to a Karen. She gets things done. I've dated many women in the past before I settled on my calm, demure, passive, calm and understand intelligent women. None of them hold a candle to the power of sheer will displayed by my wife. She's an executive for a computer manufacturer, and I kid you not, one of the scariest business minds I've ever known, but she's putty in my hands at home. See, Karens live dual lives. They are aged to the public and loving in private, but you need to limit your exposure risk or become a target yourself. Less information the better. She hates wasted time on pontificating. You calculate the best option, anticipate what she'll say, and you can effectively walk on eggshells on the tough topics. It sounds exhausting, and it can be, but it's also incredibly rewarding. Karens get shit done, and I love her for it. My stepmom is a Karen. It's mortifying. I don't remember the last time we went out to eat in public together. I remember offering to babysit my youngest brother so she and my dad could go out for their anniversary, and my dad responded, "I'm not taking that woman anywhere." Servers have about 45 seconds to retrieve whatever inane thing she wants at the table just in case she wants to use it before she's flagging down a different server to get the manager. Everything she orders has anywhere between 3 and 12 things changed about it. She will forget what things she asked for, though, and be rude about it. When her food arrives, retail people are stuck with her grilling them over the exact location of everything she can't immediately find. Anything less specific than aisle 7, third shelf from the top, between products X and Y, and she throws a fit. She will also linger for 30 to 40 minutes after she has everything she needs, because she likes browsing. She shows up late for movies and gets passive aggressive with the staff there too, like they're supposed to psychically know that she's coming and they need to hold up their whole movie schedule so she doesn't miss the previews that she will bitch about sitting through. We've tried calling her out on it. The best we've been able to do is limit her shitty behavior when she's at the house. My grandmother said it best, bless that woman's heart. Not married to one. My wife is a wonderful person. She makes everyone around her better. But her mother, I have stories, let's just say that after an event that happened just 2 years ago involving my then 4-year-old daughter, I have a standing rule that my kid is never allowed to be around her without one of us present and with our own transportation point, and I've never been prouder of my wife than when she stood up to her mother when we were in the NICU. My mother-in-law had been told she could come see the baby, but would not be allowed to hold her. She was 2 months premature, and at our hospital they only allow parents to hold them when they are that small, so we asked her to wait to come visit. She insisted. The first couple of days, while I was there, she was fine. Then, on the day I had to go back to work, while my wife was holding the 3 pounds of newborn, my mill starts throwing a fit wanting to hold the baby. She gets loud enough to start waking up the other sleeping NICU babies. My wife had enough and said in a quiet but firm voice, "Listen, if you don't shut up right now, I'm going to call security and I will make sure you are not allowed back into the hospital." Let's just say there is a reason I wanted to move 12 hours away right after we got married. There were other reasons too, but getting my wife out from under her mother's thumb and not being dependent on her for anything was one of the major ones. It hurt so much in high school/college watching my then girlfriend capitulate to a woman she had no choice but to rely on for food/essentials and not be able to do anything about it. Throw away because she knows my Reddit name. We've been together 15 years, married 9. She was divorced with 2 kids when we met. We raised those kids, got married along the way, had 2 more kids of our own. Point life with her is hell. She's a classic narcissist with textbook behaviors and causes. She also suffers from PMDD. She's very quick to anger, always complaining, always blaming. When she gets angry, she nags, scolds and is generally a totally abrasive and condescending cunt to anybody who defies/questions/contradicts her. Give her a little bit of attitude, even unintentionally, get your faking head bit off. Point she's in the other room yelling at my 6-year-old son as I type this, berating him, incessantly, relentlessly, in a harsh tone, and with harsh words not to be used with little kids. She treats them like all the other men in her life, who have tried to control her. She's a control freak, but insists I'm the control freak. She lies to me, insists I'm the liar. She abuses me, verbally, and insists I'm the abuser. She's not accountable to anyone for anything. Won't willingly absorb any criticism or responsibility. Always points out how her mistakes are really my fault. Hasn't worked outside the house in over 6 years. She spends our money, hard earned by me, on frivolous bullshit. She spends all her time on FB, causes fights online with inflammatory comments. She's materialistic. She's petty. She holds on to every grudge, forever. She's always trying to keep up with the Joneses. She's very easily offended. She's caused several of my old friends to cut ties with me. She talks shit about everybody. She talks shit about my family. She always speaks up if something isn't to her exactly liking at a restaurant, etc. She's embarrassed me on way too many occasions to count. Point, but I love her, and I will never leave her. She's not mentally well, and PMDD is the worst, and she had a shitty childhood, with overbearing, selfish, narcissist mother who chased her father off, and sometimes things are good. I feel like she needs me, even though she doesn't think she needs me, and doesn't appreciate anything I do for her. I just bite my tongue, console my kids, and tell myself every day not to piss her off/argue with her. Eggshells in a minefield. Point, it actually felt terrible to type all that, but somehow I feel better getting it out. Thanks. Not married to one, but my stepmom is a Karen. Here is a summary. My stepmom and my dad moved across the country after dating for a brief amount of time when I was 4. So I had to visit them every summer. She was the typical Karen, verbally abusive to staff and restaurant employees, made fun of hotel staff for speaking bad English, downplayed my mum's struggle as a Korean immigrant, saying that her life wasn't all that bad. But here is the ultimate reason that my stepmom is a Karen. She was a Karen to me too. She absolutely hated any attention my father gave me growing up. I remember making pictures for my dad when I was 6 to 7, and she would throw them in the trash and I'd be like, that was for my dad, and she would always respond it was ugly, he wouldn't like them. When I got older, my dad would take me fishing, and she was always a massive beach to my dad when we got back. I don't visit anymore, but every phone call I have with him, he has to have it on speaker and my stepmom is always there listening, and I'll even hear her add input to our conversations. There's a lot more, but the final straw was obviously when she was physically abusive, but also the one time when she got so angry at my dad giving me attention that she threw a birdcage sideways on my bed when I was 11. Sheet and seeds everywhere all over my bed with the bird still in it. Another time she got so angry that I had pink eye and that my dad was concerned, she got so pissed that she refused to take me to a doctor because it wasn't that bad. She used to lie to my dad saying I did bad things that I never did. Karen is the term used to describe a female narcissistic sociopath that has no empathy and wants to get rid of anything that takes the attention away from them / doesn't benefit them. Fat Karens. I didn't marry one, but my dad did. Her name is really Karen. I lost my mom when I was 2 years old in a car accident. My dad met this woman a few years later and they married. She rolls a dice each hour to determine what kind of mood she's in and what she's going to be upset about. She sent me to a mental hospital after beating me for eating a bagel after coming home from school with nothing to eat. I went to the police with blood on my head from it, and they said I should respect my parents more. Lol. She has destroyed my self-esteem, my confidence, my mental health, and my body image. She shamed me publicly and thrown beer bottles at me and my dad when she was drunk. Physical fights happened but were rare. She is very emotionally and verbally abusive. She's kicked my 2 older siblings out before me one by one. None of them got along until my brother and her talked politics. She's extremely jealous of my sister and I, probably because we take my dad's attention away from her. Just a theory and I know it's gross. Lol. She hasn't let him work in over 2 years. My dad isn't allowed to do things he wants to because she's so invested in politics and pretty possessive in general. She threatened to kick me off the health insurance plan because of who I liked politically. She's dragged me into my room by my hair and locked me in it over politics. I moved out when I was 19. I'm 20 now and live happily in my grandma's apartment with my new cat and ferret far away from her. Unfortunately, my dad still has to deal with it. But honestly, it's his bed and he can sleep in it. I can sense he isn't happy since everyone around him has been distancing themselves. My sister says it's not worth dealing with her to get to him, and that's pretty sad. Not blaming her, but I don't have to deal with Karen anymore, and I can grow and heal from the shit she's put me through. I have so many stories about her. I think that my mother qualifies as a Karen. She definitely is demanding and gets very upset if things are not exactly as she wants them. She then holds the nearest person to her responsible. This was merely annoying when I was growing up. Then she started going totally off the rails in my teens. My dad and she divorced because he'd had a heart attack from all kinds of stress, not the least of which was her attitude, and her reaction to his heart attack was that he'd done it on purpose to ruin Thanksgiving because, oh yeah, he had the attack on Thanksgiving Day. From there she's gone even further and further out of control. Over 20 years later now she's in a full-time nursing home because for the past decade plus she has insisted that she has an allergic reaction to her insulin. Not possible, so she just didn't take it. She has now had most of her left foot amputated and all her right leg from mid-shin down is gone. She is overweight and has to be Hoyle lifted. It's like a little crane out of her bed into her wheelchair. She screams, literally screams, at all the CNAs and nurses that take care of her, especially if they are black. She's terrified that all black people will rob and rap her. Yes, I'm serious. She's had to be moved twice now because she has this habit of calling 911 if she pushes her call light and doesn't get a nurse in her room within 5 minutes. She likes to claim that they are abusing and bullying her, and we are finally making progress on getting her an actual diagnosis for her clear personality disorder. Narcissistic personality disorder is my bet. It's really pretty sad at the end of the day. People like this do not live good lives, and those lives do not end well. I know all of these details from my sister. I haven't spoken to my mother in over a year, not since she told us that she was going to change her will. She has no money to leave us. Mind, this is just her being hurtful, so that my sis and I are not in charge of her ashes after cremation, because she thinks that we would probably just flush her remains down the toilet. She said this totally unprompted. I have no idea what gave her the idea. But if that's what she thinks of her children, that were trying to take care of her up to that point, then she clearly doesn't need us. Best of luck to her. Have an aunt, in her 70s, who is the original Karen. She was a Karen, with the haircut, before Karens were a thing. Even as a little kid I recall her complaining to the manager at a restaurant she's always on some new fad diet, so always brings her own food to supplement at a restaurant and wants them to warm it up for her. For my parents' 50th anniversary, the whole family went to a family-style Italian restaurant, which Karen wanted to try. She brought her own boiled chicken, asked the waitress to warm it up, then wanted separate pasta from what we'd already ordered and asked for it to be prepared specially, butter, no olive oil, or the whole explaining in detail about this new diet she's on. She sends food back. She wants some special thing. Everything has to be on the side. She takes any and all food left over, even at someone else's, and they don't want it. She even takes the lemons from the water glasses home. She always has plastic bags in her purse for such purposes. Even if there's a tablespoon of something left, she takes it home. Last time she stayed with my parents, she didn't even eat the leftovers. They were still in my mom's fridge when she left. My uncle has been married to her for 40 years. No one knows how he does it. Well, he hides wine all over the outside of the house so he can escape for a quick drink. There's some in his barbecue grill, so he grills out a lot. They have an outdoor pool. One year it got really warm towards the end of May, so uncle opens the pool, gets it ready and takes a swim. Aunt Karen freaks out because we don't open the pool until June 1st. It was like 4 days early. She made him close the pool back up. Uncle is not allowed to go anywhere without Karen, and she cannot get ready to go anywhere without at least an hour and a half prep time. Sometimes when my parents visit them, my dad will want to go out to breakfast with my uncle. But they know, if Karen hears them, they will have to wait until she's up and ready and breakfast will be over by then. So they will tiptoe out of the house, put whatever car is last in the driveway in neutral, push it out of the driveway, out into the street, and down the block a bit, then hop in, start the engine and gun it down the road. The neighbors out walking looked at them really strangely. The last time they did this, my dad told my mom their plan. Aunt Karen was asleep. Mom said afterwards, as soon as the engine started, she heard Aunt Karen jump out of bed, run downstairs, calling for my uncle, then opened the front door, and was yelling his name. They were long gone by then. My mom pulled the blankets up, and pretended to be asleep, when Aunt Karen knocked on her door. I should get my cousin in on this. She's got stories of fun times with Karen as well. Oh, I didn't even mention the great male Polish shopping adventure. My wife turned into a Karen, thanks to Facebook. In a matter of months, she became a victim, and the only victim. It didn't help that her family has plenty of Karens with all the advice about men. Not one of them is married, or had a man in their life. Then all now. She would complain that nobody listened or cared, while I listened, caring. She would say people were trying to shut her up, despite nobody stopping her talking for hours on end, repeating herself. Nothing was good enough. Ever. It took me far too long to see that my opinion didn't register, my arguments were ignored, and my problems didn't matter. I tried and tried, telling her she was unfair, and she didn't see it. She would just assume I'm just being another typical guy, when I'm definitely not. Autism is a beach point really. She was avoiding confrontation by heading it off. She would see a problem, apply the solution, and justify it. Because I was never consulted, my problems were never addressed. So, one day, she had enough of me and we separated. I left the state to get a clean break and to escape my destroyed reputation and her friends. Months later, I started talking to someone else, and she couldn't stand it. She was relentless against my new relationship, and it worked. She's still on my ass, and just today demanded that I speak to her. I'd prefer anything else, including not talking to anyone ever. She still insists we should be together strangely. She was sweet when asking for the manager. Amazing results. Kind of long. There is a TLDR. At the bottom, I was married to a woman who became Karen. Now don't get me wrong. We had fun, and I was happy for at least the first half of this story. I'm just cherry picking things that are signs of Karen. When we got together, she was in college. Didn't care about anything. One time when we started dating, they gave her the wrong food and she just shrugged and said, "Oh well, I get to try something new I guess." Smiled and happily ate it. About 7 months into our relationship, she said she wanted to move to California to be close to her dad and establish residency there so she could get her master's degree there. I was young and in love, so I agreed. I left my well-paying job in healthcare with a large number of advancement opportunities to go work in a call center until I could find something better. We lived there for about 9 months before she changed her mind completely. She wanted to come back home. Around the same time, a buddy of mine tried to convince me to come work with him in Phoenix, as we were originally from Tucson. It's about 100 miles away from Tucson depending on where you live / where you're going. It was a great opportunity, and it brought us closer to family. Over the next couple years, I didn't notice anything Karen level, but I did notice, however, that she went from asking me to do literally nothing and always doing everything / buying everything from herself to asking me more and more. I happily obliged, because one of the ways I show love is by doing / giving whatever I can to the person. I started noticing the change at about mid-year 3. It was small and infrequent at first, but whenever she didn't get her way on something, she'd just generally be in a bad mood. I realized when she was in a bad mood, it meant my day was gonna suck too, so rather than deal with the bad mood, I'd get things fixed for her. More than once I drove back to a drive-thru to reorder food for her. One day after we had gotten her order and it had been messed up a couple times, I asked her to check the food before we left the parking lot. It was wrong, so I went back and got it fixed. She asked me, "Did you talk to the manager?" "No, I just gave it to the girl at the counter and she apologized and fixed it." "That's ridiculous. They'll never learn if you don't get management involved." That was the first time I fixed something for her, and she stayed in a bad mood. From there, she started picking at everything I did until I changed my behavior to be exactly what she said she wanted. I mean, full on screaming at me for putting a pan in the cupboard incorrectly, or sobbing for hours about how I don't care about her when I forgot my phone at home when I went to work. Then I got a new job which required longer hours sometimes. It paid really well, and it wasn't all the time, but sometime I had to pull 10 over 12-hour days for a couple days in a week. Deadlines. Now, that's when I really noticed the problem. She started accusing me of not caring about her or our relationship on days when I'd just come home exhausted after my third 12-hour day in a row. I'd tell her I just need to sit back and relax for a bit, then we can go out and do something. You'd think I just admitted to cheating on her with her mom or something. The meltdown that occurred, yelling nonstop at me, saying I'm lazy and hate doing things with her. This was about halfway into the 4th year. After that, I was able to convince my job to let me work from home full time, and we moved to Tucson City so she could be closer to her family. She blamed her meltdown on missing her family. Our families lived on opposite sides of town and we moved less than 2 miles from her mom. I thought, hey, if she can just go hang out with her mom or other family on long days, that'll make my life easy. No. I found out her mother actually made shit worse for her. Her mom basically denied her everything she ever asked for and would scold her if she got upset. She'd been living a few years in the exact opposite environment. She got anything she wanted. When her inner Karen came out, her mom would make it worse, and they would have explosive arguments where shit would come up from the past. Apparently my wife was always a Karen when she was younger, but her mom had parented it away. I spoiled her and brought it back. It was my fault. And the worst part is, the story isn't over there. I slipped a disc in my neck and never got it checked out. It eventually got really bad that I had to go to the doctor. I ended up having to sleep in the couch due to having to sleep with my arm completely extended. It was a sectional. Sleeping in bed with another person was impossible. Hell, actually sleeping was impossible. This went on for about a month before I eventually was able to have surgery to remove the disc. Apparently I was very exhausted and ended up taking an extra 4 hours to fully wake up. On the way home from the hospital I got an earful from her for sleeping for too long. I think she realized how bad it was at that point too. I apologized for it, and that set her off even worse. You don't need to be sorry about it. You must think I'm some horrible bitch who doesn't care about you. I literally just had no energy anymore and couldn't handle anything, so I just zoned out. I know there was still noise happening, but I didn't have the capacity to focus on it and take it in. Then we were home. I somehow had acquired a new power. I could now zone out and just let her be mad. It only took 5 years. Literally 2 weeks later was her birthday. Now I was ordered to not do much of anything by doctors for at least a month after surgery, so I called my sisters for help setting up a surprise party. They drove for 45 minutes to get there and helped me rearrange everything so we could have a party-like place. Went and bought all the food / picked up the cake and all that. Point I think the party was the catalyst that finalized her transformation. I had convinced her mother to take her to a movie or whatever, just bring her home at 3. I had invited a bunch of her family over for the party and my family was there as well. The genius part one thought was that family members all planned to leave around 5:30ish, and that's when friends were expected to show up, so the party would go from family fun to friend party. About 20 minutes after the surprise moment she started. There is too many people here, can you ask your family to leave? What? They all drove almost an hour to get here and helped set everything up. That's not my fault, but it is my party, tell them to leave. Fine, I told my mom and she looked at me knowingly and said don't worry about it. She got my sisters together and they all quietly left. That was her moment. The second they left she started loudly complaining to her cousin about how rude it was that my mom and sisters left 20 minutes into the party. She full on played the victim. I called all of my friends and let them know I wasn't feeling up to having a party, I have to cancel it. I then told her my neck was hurting, which was 100% true, and I went and popped an extra pain pill and fell asleep for the rest of the day. When I woke up the house was still completely trashed. She went to work and left me a note saying I needed to clean up after the party. Point I lost it, but not for what she was putting on me, because I couldn't do it. I had couches moved and I couldn't even pick up a gallon of milk right now. About an hour went by. All the trash had been picked up and bagged and I was trying to lean on the couch to push it without lifting. My dad called me an idiot for not calling for help. They took care of everything and made me go back to bed. Point from there it just got worse. I dreaded going anywhere because I didn't know what kind of fresh new hell awaited if somebody messed something up. She decided to get her master's degree after that and got in at ASU in PHX. So we moved back. Things were terrible the whole time, but she was busy with school, which made it more bearable. I started seeing a therapist in secret. I wanted to find help for myself, so I could figure out how I could better help her. After a few sessions, the therapist told me I was in a toxic relationship and I needed to start standing up for myself and put up boundaries. I actually quit going because in my head everything was my fault at this point and he didn't know what he was talking about. Then she got her master's. Took a few months to get a job in her field, but shortly after she did, she said I wasn't fun anymore and she was tired of trying to drag me to go do things with her and left me after a coworker kissed her at work. That was almost year 9. It's been just over a year and I want to find the dude and send him a case of beer because I've never been happy at ELDR. I gave a nice kind woman everything she wanted for years and turned her into a Karen. Growing up, my mom was a Karen. She bulldozed so many people in the name of doing what's right for her children. She did it in a nice, manipulative way though. Like she was gonna get her way, so she'd start out nicely and bring down hellfire if you refused. Point in 4th grade, we were going to watch Star Wars on a class trip, but my mom complained it was too violent / scary, and I had to wait until I was 13 to watch. We instead watched March of the Penguins. Everyone hated me. Point in 5th grade, I was having trouble finishing my morning work, so she had them take me out of the patrol program. I was the only 5th grader without a job. The patrol program leader turned out to be a bit off-aisle, so I guess I got lucky. She had multiple meetings with my principals to make sure I was treated right at school. Before I went to middle school, she called a conference for all my teachers to tell them what a special learner I was. When she put me on the spot, I couldn't tell them my special needs. So my mom went on about how they needed to give me extra attention and coddle me. Point everywhere we went, she'd save 10 seats and sure as hell call the manager if anything was wrong. My poor dad has learned to just give up because if he disagrees with my mom, she has a meltdown. I experienced this yesterday. My mom asked me to pray for her and I said I would. She said no, do it right now. Pray out loud for me. I told her I'm not comfortable doing that, I don't really pray. And she countered, well, I've had to do plenty of things in my life for you that I didn't want to do, referring you the drastic measures she took to control my "perfect childhood." I just wish there was a little more give and take. Yes, she gave me so much as a child, but it was really just her trying to control my life experiences. My ex was the Duchess of Karens. Her mother was the Queen Beach of Karens. My ex was so Karen that, while she couldn't ask to speak to my manager, for instance my mother, since she was deceased, she nonetheless repeatedly would use "what would your mother think" as a replacement, even though while my mother was alive, my ex was extremely jealous and dismissive of her. Living with a Karen is exhausting, and over time, parts of yourself die, or are buried so deep as to being the same thing. You learn to tiptoe around things, to avoid triggering the Karen-ness. You bury stuff deep down and always make concessions to avoid the eruptions. You do this knowing it's killing who you are inside. You often do this for the sake of the kids. Until you don't. I gambled on the strength of my relationship with my children when I decided I had had enough and separated from her. It took a few years in the beginning to repair that relationship with my kids, but now it is as strong, if not stronger than before, and more importantly, I can be myself and go out without fear of being embarrassed or forced into situations where I have to defend a wrong when I know it's wrong. Being married to a Karen is a death sentence to one's soul, to one's integrity. Most allow themselves to die inside to avoid the pain of a divorce. The lucky few like myself pay the price of such pain to regain our freedom and our souls. Sales of Karen's essential oils have recently taken a turn for the worst. She hasn't been declaring her profits to the HMRC, so is not entitled to any extra financial compensation above her monthly universal credit payments, which she thinks is incredibly unfair. Today is a good day for Karen though, as she has just been accepted for a 0% interest Very account, so that's her evening sorted. Pyjamas, a glass of prosecco and a well-earned spending spree. A quick check on Facebook to see what the girls have been up to first though. As Karen nestles into her sofa with her gluten-free soft cheese ricotta, she finds herself aghast at what Miss Bailey, her zany art teacher from 15 years back, has just shared to her newsfeed. Say no to lockdown. Don't let the government seize control with 5G towers that give you coronavirus. Now Karen's an intelligent lady. She once completed a Sudoku without using a calculator. She finished a color by numbers oil painting with just a single purple crayon. She passed her cycling proficiency. She can unwrap a starburst using only her mouth. Karen prizes herself on being able to spot fake news articles that are not in any way factually accurate. Karen immediately shares Miss Bailey's post to alert all of her friends and family to the government's evil plans. Oh my god, PLS share. This is not acceptable. Karen's copycat perfume selling sister Beatrice shares. Karen's nan Maggie, who adores Karen because she's her cleverest grandchild, shares. Karen's flat earther tattoo artist shares. Karen's hairdresser shares. Karen's blind pen pal shares. Karen's anti-vax school friend shares. She fancied him back in the day, so she shares some of his anti-vax posts back as a sort of indirect flirt. Karen then finishes her prosecco, orders herself a rose gold Apple Watch from Very, and falls asleep watching Tipping Point. Today the news coverage has been about the telecommunications key workers that have been threatened and assaulted whilst trying to maintain and improve this country's communication infrastructure. There's a growing anti-vax community choosing not to vaccinate themselves and their kids against disease. This is not only putting themselves in danger, but also the entire population due to an intrinsic breakdown of herd immunity. This is a growing issue in India right now, HPV, as people blindly believe the fear-mongering anti-vax propaganda that's circulating social media. Over the next year, don't be surprised to see either a very expensive pro-vaccine campaign or government mandating vaccination in order to ensure it is effective. Don't underestimate stupidity or it'll become our undoing. This is all very sad to see so many people's mistrust in science, technology and our leadership at a time we need it the most. Don't be a Karen. My brother married a Karen. Her father was the CFO of a top pharmaceutical corporation. You would likely know if I named it. She would look uncomfortable during our happy family gatherings with her arms crossed, looking like she was sneering and judging all of us, and flash a fake smile on occasion. You could tell that she and her family were uptight, counting the minutes until they could leave despite everyone else having a fun time. I thought maybe it was just a bad fit of personalities. It happens. However, when we'd go to restaurants and stuff, it'd be the same uptight behavior towards the help. The way my family was raised is we were taught to respect everyone no matter what their station in life is. Not with these people. The day of the wedding I heard the Karen bragging about all the wedding gifts they got like it was all a money-making grift for her. Even the priest who wedded them sounded sarcastic during the procession. I don't know if she or someone else in her family said some stupid shit to him or not, but he seemed like he was mocking the entire affair. My family and extended family is awesome, but I suppose weren't rich enough to make her and her family feel comfortable. In every other previous instance, when we'd introduce significant others to meet the family and have dinner and stuff, it was always a great fun experience. I had one girlfriend start crying after the first time she went with me to my family gathering for a holiday because she'd never felt so relaxed, happy and accepted by a family before, including her own. Nope, not good enough for the Karen. My brother thankfully divorced the sociopath, and then she turned into a neighbor using their kid as a weapon against him, but I won't go into the long drawn out details there. Now he's with someone that's great for him. Thank goodness I briefly dated a Karen in my late teens. She was also a spolied, rich brat. One of the last times I hung out with her we waited in a line together to get food. She tilted her body like she had a stick up her ass, crossed her arms tightly, and began tapping her foot loudly on the floor. I literally pulled away from her and just stared at her with a bemused look on my face, like I was watching a monkey at the zoo. She was so self-absorbed she didn't even notice me looking at her like that and just stared down the help who obviously wasn't rushing around fast enough for her. I faked her and left her. My timing was good because I heard she later contracted VD with someone else, then was knowingly having sex with other people, spreading it around. My mom is Karen and she's a faking saint here to save all other Karens. A friend of everyone. Never complains, always helps, lifts others up. A heart of gold. Always listens, infinite patience. Takes praise with humility. Makes no excuses, a goddess. All of this with an insane life story that she'll tell, if you ask, as casually as a Sunday morning. Here's what she went through. Alcoholic parents who beat her, shamed her, and cut her down. Ran away from home at 16. Hitchhiked, was pistol whipped, beaten, and almost murdered. Lived in commune, worked at a mattress factory, got prego and moved back home. Baby daddy, broke up before baby was born. At 20, no school but was recognized as highly intelligent and some rando company paid to send her to a programming school. Revolutionized several companies. Married a Bolivian diplomat's son. Funny story how, who beat her almost to the brink of death. My grandfather was a Freemason and put a hit out on him, but she stopped it. Went into hiding from diplomat, worked in a club that was actually a front for a drug ring, unbeknownst to her. Worked odd tech jobs for a while. Her son, half bro, was troubled from the beginning. Maybe autistic. No social skills, strange and violent behavior, didn't pay attention in school, but could remember everything taught. Around 10 years old, her and BBD sent him to a medical center to observe behavior and get help. Instead, center started experimenting on him. Bro was too smart and kept all the meds they gave him, then came up with a plan. Dad would take him to the dentist and they'd take off. So, they did, went into hiding, and mom covered their tracks. Medical center went after her saying she broke a contract or something, but Mama Bear came back at them saying, oh yeah, well we know what you didn't have proof. I'd like to speak to the manager. Lol JK. They were like oh shit and back down. Dad took son. They split before he was born. Not my dad. For safety reasons, etc. Mom thought maybe she could use some therapy and went to LifeSpring. Quickly climbed the ranks and became a leader. Realized it was kinda culty and bailed, but met my pops, babies, divorce. Built her own renovation company ground up and has loyal clients. Remarried 10 years later to a chill dude. He likes to stay at home and read. She likes to do projects and adventure outside. They respect each other and say love you, see you later. She does joke that she had been in bad love enough times and needed a good guy, so when he proposed she said yes because she liked him and learned to love him. I think that's perfectly fine. Our story isn't very interesting from that point on. She was super chill growing up. Maybe too much lol. Here's a story to get the idea of who she was as a parent. Seniors had beach week after graduation. She volunteered to be a chaperone because she knew we were going to party hard, but at least she could keep us safe. It was my graduation and my brother, plus 2 years, was there too. Even though we knocked on neighbors' doors beforehand to give hashes for them to call if we were too loud. They were pricks anyway, and we got caught by the police when someone let them in. They gathered us upstairs to get IDs and charge us, but, by luck, they got a call for a robbery. We were on a small island. They said they were going to charge my mom at the least. She had to go to court, but because she's a faking badass she had made all the parents and kids sign liability releases before the trip. My pops has always been around for my brother and I, but has faked over my mom in a lot of ways. Control issues, emotional abuse, money stuff. What really stands out is the extent of her kindness and poise. She has informed me now of his issues, but at 30 years old, and because I asked, her kindness even extended to inviting him to Thanksgiving, Christmas, etc. both when we lived home and for a few years after we left. To this day my pops is single and says, "Tell your mom I love her." Cringe. She's an Aquarius. Have a sister who is a Karen. Anti-vax, has one vaccinated son, because public school got a he now has eczema and her other kids don't, so ick now. Vaccines, full boat colloidal silver level 9001. If someone doesn't agree with her she blows them up over Facebook. Dad and mom spend 4 months out of the year living with them as a retirement vacation location that's warmer. Coronavirus hits and dad asks her kids to not touch him or go in his cabin as they are fucking dirt monkeys. White kids just saying they barely take soapy baths, wash in the fucking creek, and call it done. He is 65 and realizes the risk he is at. She blows up, tells him it's the flu and he can leave since it's her property. He goes okay and drives back here. Now every day she makes a 10-paragraph post, comment on someone else's post, etc. about how she's the victim in the situation. Basically most of the family is on the verge of turning their back on her for good. I choose to stay out of it and apply my surefire how not to get family hatred. Step 1. Always drive separately. Step 2. When shit hits the fan so to say I respectfully leave and I don't respond to anything crazy. Texts, FB, calls. If they want to talk respectfully and admit their faults I'll forgive them. That's what grown-ups do. Never feel obligated to deal with someone's piss poor manners because they are related to you. Blood don't mean shit. My stepmom is a Karen, but we'll call her Shani. I have so many stories about her I don't know where to start. She has always been unbearable at restaurants. She used to be a vegetarian and I remember once at Macaroni Grill she was trying to complicate her order, which she does literally at every restaurant, even now that she eats meat again, by having meat removed from the meal and asking for a different sauce. I understand being vegetarian and eating out can be difficult, but she was basically making up her own entree. She then tried to tell the server it had to be cooked on a grill that had never been used to cook meat. Mind you, this isn't because of religion or anything of that nature. And after getting the slightest pushback from the server she starts yelling I don't want to eat here, they'll spit in my food. I honestly don't know how much spit has been ingested due to her behavior. She's the type of person that goes to Olive Garden and asks for light ice, or goes through the McDonald's line ordering 10 burgers and a few meals, but asking for different condiments on each burger. And when that one burger that wasn't supposed to have onions and mustard comes out with mustard she flips. She has driven back through the drive-through line to complain. She honestly duped my dad into marrying her. She originally was a homemaker, but now she just lays around the house all day and takes my dad's pension and current employment checks. He made the mistake of allowing her to take over the finances once, when he was out of the country for work, and now he gets $50 every 2 weeks for himself. She's outwardly bragged behind his back about all of the money she has tied up in accounts he doesn't know about. It's honestly pathetic, but I think he thinks he'll lose more by divorcing her at this point. She's also managed to alienate my father from almost all of his family, including myself. The last time I saw her was in 2017 for my little sister's birthday. I guess she was upset that I had to work late and couldn't make it to dinner, so I called once I was off work and arrived at the house. When they all got back from dinner, she was being very short and refused to speak directly to me. When my now wife and I began ignoring her loud groans of annoyance and talking to everyone else, Shani decided to announce to the room she was going to bed. She then proceeded to stomp up the stairs and slam the door. My dad and Shani's mom were both in the room and refused to acknowledge what had just happened. They didn't want to make eye contact with us, just kept staring at the TV. So we left and never set foot inside the house again. After a year of arguing with my father over the temper tantrum Shani had, he sent me a long message blaming me for apparently being rude to Shani while I was a child. I'm certain anything I did wrong as a child I have apologized and paid for dearly. Somehow some insignificant actions from over 25 years ago caused Shani to act like a Karen for all of these years, and it's all my fault. Lol. Honestly, my life has been better not having to bow down to someone else's whims just to receive their grace. I know there are numerous stories. Karens aren't just Karens a handful of times, but I'll keep this from getting any longer. If you're still reading, thank you. I hope this was equally as entertaining as it was therapeutic for me. TLDR, my stepmom is a Karen and she sucks, dude. My aunt is a Karen. In the UK, a store is restricting it to one person per household at a time. She told her husband, who is a lovely chap but looks dead inside, to pretend they are not connected. When they were queuing, the store manager noticed how much they were talking, and when asked if they were together, she told the manager, not your business. They were asked to leave, so on her way out she tells everyone loudly in the line to pretend they are couples to spite the store. She then raised hell with their customer service line. She told us this over the phone, literally using words like stupid lockdown and I will show them how ridiculous they are being. I have a load of stories from her since the lockdown started. Another story, she got tossed out of Tesco for refusing to following the one-way lines on the floor. Might not sound too bad. They told her she is going the wrong way and risking other people. She replied, I know, I'm doing it on purpose. So they had her removed. All these are what she told us. Her own words, the worst thing I have heard come out of her lips, to her own mother, mind you. This whole lockdown is silly. Let the business open up again. Just let the old people die. She is 50, her mother is 80, they will be dying soon anyway. The NHS are useless. The money will be better spent on our economy. My aunt is a Karen and she recently endangered my uncle's life. First of all, I was never really fond of her prior to this. She was always way too loud, and at Christmas always wanted lots of gifts for some reason, even more than kids. Still, she's my aunt, and I don't mind seeing her a couple times a year. So they live in a city that was the first in our country to be in full lockdown because of the growing number of coronavirus cases. My aunt continued to work, even though there were already a few confirmed cases where she worked. A few weeks later, she had a fever and was coughing, so our family told her to call the health line. We have an actual health system, so getting tested is free, so they could tell her what to do. Instead, she insisted it was just a cold, and continued working. After a few days the symptoms were gone. 2 weeks later, my uncle, her husband, starts showing symptoms. Same story, we urge them to get tested. They say it's just a cold, no big deal. But this time it doesn't get better. My uncle keeps getting worse, and they still don't get tested, until finally a family member almost threatens them to get tested. When they go to the hospital, he's really sick, and they hospitalize him and give him oxygen because he's having trouble breathing. Surprise surprise, He tested positive for coronavirus and is now being treated for pneumonia. If they had waited a few more days he probably wouldn't have survived. Obviously everyone's bashing on my aunt because she is the probable transmitter of the virus since she was the only one working, and if she was tested earlier this would all be preventable. Still, she says it's not her fault, she did nothing wrong, and she wasn't the one who transmitted the virus. My uncle's safe now, and he's already home, getting better, but I can't believe my aunt doesn't have the decency to apologize for being so irresponsible. I actually just had my first Karen experience yesterday. I work at a Subway that due to COVID-19 only offers deliveries, Uber Eats, Deliveroo etc. As you can imagine the Uber tablet is always going off. We get a call on the shop phone from a lady who is irate. I've spent the last 20 faking minutes trying to change the delivery address for my order. What stupid faking app are you a part of? You need to change it. Today is my first day back, and I'm writing my resignation letter in my head. However, the owner of the store is in, so I put the phone on speaker. Calmly I tell her I will find her order and write her proper address on the bag as well as telling the driver when they arrive. I ask for her order number and lo and behold her name is Karen. Apparently my compromise wasn't good enough. I need to call Uber and reimburse her $4. Her usual delivery fee is $3.99 not $7.99. Or throw in $4 worth of food or she will call my manager and get me fired. I calmly tell her that she will have to contact Uber for any reimbursement as I can't change her address on my end and I'm not able to throw in free food. Anyway, she says you work at Subway and you can't even do that right. You're so faking incompetent. Put me on to the manager. You're done. I hand the phone over to the boss and instantly she brings out the waterworks claiming I called her stupid and fat for her order. Long story short, the owner says the phone has been on speaker and he had heard everything. I've still got my job. P.S. Her order was a double meat tuna with avocado white toasted. Only salad extra onion with extra aioli and salt and pepper. So gross. My dad married a Karen. They started seeing each other when I was about 16. I'm a people pleaser and desperately just wanted to maintain a relationship with my dad, although beyond driving me to sports competitions or hanging out with my best friend's dad, we didn't spend much time together before the divorce, let alone after. One time I got myself invited to dinner at their house, and she made 2 trays of lasagna for us. She portioned out a third of the lasagna to each of us and was upset when I didn't finish my plate. She immediately fell victim to me, saying, "Oh, I'm sure your mom makes much better lasagna. You don't have to lie about why you're not eating it. I'm sure it's terrible. I'm a horrible cook." She then pulled the same sheet with peach cobbler dessert. She complained to my dad that I would never approve of her and that I was trying to drive a wedge between them. Years later in my 20s I got reprimanded by her for sending birthday cards to his place of work. He never called me to say he got them, but she found some of them and decided I was a sneaky bitch. She turned threatening not too long after that, saying I insulted her sons and she was going to come punch my teeth in. Exactly 1 year of therapy and 1 police report later, I haven't spoken directly to my father in over 10 years. I'm 33 now. My mother died suddenly in 2016. I got married in 2018 and just had my first child last week, all without the support of a parent. I feel like in spite of it all, I came out the other side. I suspect my dad married a Karen because he missed his mommy. She died when he was 23 and he was a severe mama's boy. She used projection and gaslighting to sever all of his ties with his former life. I mourn the loss of a father, but he made his bed. Last I heard from my grandfather, he's living in FL with a new name, still guilting him out of money to pay for their bad business schemes. Not married to one, but my mother was one as I was growing up, and it was cringy and embarrassing. Let me preface this as we were poor. She worked her ass off, but we still lived in subsidized housing. I got discounted lunches. She checked prices of everything when we went shopping, and I realized the tooth fairy wasn't real when I got change for a tooth and noticed it was from her room. I had colored on the faces. But as a Karen, I don't think she was even rude, but insistent on getting what was fair. She would use coupons and figure everything out in advance, would follow them to a T, and make the cashier accept them, or get a manager. Having worked retail, you need to just have a limit. You say I'm not paid enough to argue over this amount, and give in. I remember her fighting with a cashier over using a coupon on food stamps, back when it was coupon style food stamps, and not a net card, where she wanted to get something like $0.50 off a loaf of bread, but the guy wouldn't do it. And she mellowed out once the underlying money issue was resolved. The role of a Karen has evolved over the years, as I have seen them get worse and worse. My mother would argue over a $0.50 coupon, but I've seen people I would throw out if I was management. I worked at a big box store and had a woman fighting tooth and nail because she wanted a $200 air mattress for the $1.97 stick that was on the box, which is only used in the food section, and was the same amount as something she was purchasing, though no SKU on the sticker. I could only discount it $10. My manager offered 20%. Then a department associate said she could have it for $150. Department manager said screw it, $100, or no S from her, because she knew she was right. The store manager finally stepped in and said 20% or nothing, and when she protested he said you should have accepted the $100 when it was offered. It's $160 now. She declined and the manager had someone walk her out. This'll get buried, but hey, might as well blow off some steam. I thought my mill just had some Karen tendencies until the planning process for her son and mine's wedding. Turns out she was just a ninja Karen who hides her true nature until she really wants something. Before that she would do typical restaurant stuff, but bizarrely, 75% of the time she would not ask the server to fix the issue and would say everything was fine. She would just complain to everyone at the table, and when asked why she didn't ask for it to be fixed, it would be radio silence until after the meal, when she would complain more. Thankfully it never impacts the server's tips, since she doesn't pay, and whoever does pay ignores the frivolous complaints. The true Karen came out when she asked for stuff to do to help with the wedding. My husband and I knew she would be stressed if we gave anything too intense, so we just started off with giving a guest list of people she and his dad would like to invite. We had a 3-year engagement. Our date was decided 4 months in. 6 months before the wedding, I have nothing in the way of guests for his parents. I had set several deadlines for those in that time, and I was done extending it. I decided to just print invitations for the remaining spots and give them whatever invites were left. Since I had everyone else's guest lists ages ago, about 50 spots were left, and placed responsibility for mailing and handing them out on them, because I had to work on other things and couldn't wait on them anymore. Absolute chaos ensued over that decision. We stood firm on it. Most of their guests couldn't attend due to the very short notice. After the dust settled from that and all the related drama, she complained that we weren't involving her enough. No sheet. You couldn't even tell me who you wanted to invite for years. So I agreed to let her help pick out flowers. That went shockingly well and all seemed okay until a couple weeks before the rehearsal dinner. The subject of including his older brother came up for the 1000th time, and for various other reasons we did not want him involved besides as a guest, and neither did his brother seem to want to be involved, and reasserted this again. The wedding comes and goes and the day itself goes great. I get the pictures back and skim them, but have no time to go through them thoroughly until now, several months after the fact. It is then I noticed that his brother was part of the wedding processional and had walked his grandmothers down the aisle. This in and of itself doesn't bother me much, except that we had expressly not wanted him to be involved, and we had already arranged for one of the ushers to walk his grandmothers. I had not noticed this at the time, and neither had anyone else who knew our wishes. This has led me to the conclusion that while my husband, my parents, my wedding party, myself, and everyone else was very emotionally unavailable in the hours and minutes leading up to the ceremony, his mother manipulated and deceived in order to squeeze his brother in, despite the fact that this was expressly against our wishes. So yeah, that's what incognito Karens are capable of. My boyfriend has a brother married to a Karen, but more on the institutional side of crazy Karen. The family lives about 6 hours apart between 2 towns, but they're a tight group and visit fairly often. Family has always been a foreign and painful concept to me. My family is toxic, so I rarely make the 6-hour drive to visit, which they understand. Her antics include, she openly talked shit about my guy thinking I was asleep. I had some crazy reason to be exhausted. Either I had been in surgery or had pulled a 36-hour shift at the firehouse, I can't remember, but either way it was a valid reason to be exhausted, and had accidentally passed out at the social table for 5 minutes where the family was hanging out. She proceeds to just belittle my guy at every angle she could until I sat up and glared at her without blinking. She kept going until I verbally told her to stop. She banned her husband from talking to me directly because we shared too many cool stories together. He's military, I'm fire, yeah, we have carnage stories. She does not like that he can relate to someone of the opposite sex. She audibly complains that we girls need to stick together and manicures and babies, but every time she tries to socially involve others, she finds a way to spin the topic to be about her and how many babies she wants. 4 hours. That's gonna be a no from me. Dog. Frequently asks everyone if they think I'm prettier than her. She openly reminds everyone that it's gross that I'm 15 years younger than my boyfriend, 30 vs 45, but then demands she be acknowledged for being younger than her husband by 2 years. She announces without prompt at every gathering how lucky her husband is to have her. She insisted I have lots of babies with my guy right after, think days after, my hysterectomy for serious endometriosis. This was well known. I had been trying for 3 years to get the surgery, and news spread quickly through the family that it was a difficult surgery. Thankfully, I don't want kids, so her comment didn't hurt me in any way, but what the fuck? She complained that kids are too needy, so she took a job as a kindergarten teacher. She also plays favorites with these children to the point that it's obvious some of the kids have better opportunities than the others. My boyfriend broke his arm building a shop for his brother. He fell off the roof. His arm was visibly bent. The first thing she did as he was writhing on the ground was complain that it wouldn't be finished on schedule. At no point did she ask if he was okay. My guy bought a few groceries while visiting his brother one time and left what he didn't finish. He left all of 2 bananas. She threw a straight up tantrum about all the sheet that was left behind, and it's such a waste. We now refer to this as a 2-banana rage. She pulled a knife on her husband for some bogus reason and called the cops, claiming he attacked her. Husband was very calm and never laid a hand on her, even though she was fully intending to hurt him. Cops weren't having her story one bit. The saddest part to me is how kind her husband is. My guy worries about his little brother, especially after the knife incident, and I've expressed how saddened I am that I can't get to know him more because of her. The one and only time I got to talk to him reminded me a lot of the guarded behaviors I adopted when I found myself in an abusive relationship years prior. He's a genuinely good person and deserves to be free and happy. Last I heard, they switched her meds around and she's doing a lot better. My sister-in-law is the Karen. They have 8 kids. In the summer she pulled her giant van about 6 out of her driveway and onto the sideway so she could put 2 swimming pools out for the kids. A blue one for the boys and a pink one for the girls. I shit you not. So after pulling the van out, it was completely covering the sidewalk and they left it that way for weeks. One day, she was out there watching the kids play in the pools and a blind man walked down the sidewalk in front of their house, which is blocked by their van, and told her that he had walked into her van and hurt himself because his cane went under the huge bumper. He didn't feel it and he walked into it face first. He asked her to pull her vehicle in the driveway. She refused. She told him that her kids needed a place to play and there was nowhere else for the pools. This is a lie. They have a backyard but don't want the pools to kill the grass. Also, with a little scooching they could literally fit both pools and the van in the driveway. They just don't for whatever reason. So the man told her he was going to contact the city about it. She had the nerve to send a message to the whole family, about 15 adults, about what happened and how everyone is out to get her. She also chased a trans girl/woman, I don't know the age, out of a Walmart bathroom. She said to her, "You're a boy. You don't belong here." The person responded, "I'm a girl. I'm allowed to be here." She had her teenage sons with her at the store at the time. I don't know anything more about it, but, again, she messaged the whole family about it, like she was some faking hero. One more example. She sends the family videos of her talking while she is driving the whole car full of kids. Her kids in the background can be heard saying, "Mom, get off your phone, you're driving." Not really a Karen specific example, but just a really awful thing to do. Point, she didn't used to be this way. She used to be sweet and kind. She is a monster now. My mother-in-law is a Karen. I haven't spent much time with her since she lives a ways away, and my husband doesn't like visiting with her. Lol. Point, I've never really been around an actual Karen before, so I was skeptical about how bad she could really be, and just figured my husband's discomfort with her was more so related to their relationship than her actual behavior. I think we've maybe had like 4 or 5 visits with her altogether since he and I got together, and the majority of those visits were either very short, or we were on a vacation and were way too busy with kids and activities to really get a chance to see her real behavior. Her last visit was the first and only time that she ever stayed at our house with us. It was faking awful. She complained about our TV because we don't have cable and the streaming services are too complicated for her. She screamed at my oldest son because he was playfully sitting in her seat when she came back to sit down. She then got mad and blamed me that my husband was mad at her for the yelling at my son. She got all weepy because my daughter was afraid of her and implied it was my fault and I did it on purpose. She complained about us asking her to not watch horror movies with our kids, then watched gruesome murder shows late at night with the volume high enough to keep my sons up, and acted like they were horribly rude when they asked her if she could turn it down a little so they could sleep. I took her to a pot shop. She was loud and rude and complained about the wait time, even though we'd been there less than 10 minutes. Got snippy with the guy at the counter once her number was called because she had to wait, didn't know the name of what she wanted, and got upset that the guy gave her exactly what she asked for and not what she meant. Wouldn't shut up about how unprofessional it was that they didn't carry what she wanted even though the guy was writing down the address for a place that did have it for us, and then complained about how gross all the flavors of their CBD joints sounded, even though the guy was giving it to her at a discount. It was horrifying, and I couldn't understand why my husband let me leave the house with her. He apologized a ton and told me he just didn't think about it until I had already driven away because he was so stressed just having her in the house. He went out and bought me and the kids dinner and then took her out to eat and to the casino so we could get a few peaceful hours. She was a beach to the cocktail waitresses about the free drinks she was getting while they gambled according to my husband, and he had to give the waiter a larger than normal tip. Longest 2 days of my life. My dad is definitely a Karen. He's every bit as bad at home as he is when he's arguing with an underpaid employee in Asda. Living with him is just constant walking on eggshells. You cannot contradict him in any way, no matter how trivial the situation is or how right you are. He views everything as an argument. A while back I asked him what the Netflix login was so I could access it on my laptop. He swore blind there is no login. You just open it up and it's there, which yes, it is, on the TV, obviously not on my laptop. I told him there would have been a login, but knew better than to argue, so I just figured, that's okay, I'll just pay for my own membership. That's what I was planning to do in the first place, before I realized we could just share the same account with no extra cost. I wasn't out to mooch if it was going to be even the slightest inconvenience. But no, he was all, there's no way I'm making you pay for another account. Just share ours. Which would have been very nice of him, but he would not hear that Netflix requires a password, and then it was all YOUKDSTHNKYOUKN, however it high NG. Yo, you just can't be wrong KNYOU for telling him that. Bear in mind that my manner to him is carefully practiced over the years to be as non-confrontational as possible, and he still reacts as though I'm the one yelling at him. Me and my mum have both been to therapy and are on antidepressants, neither of which we have ever even implied have anything to do with him at all, and every time one of us got referred to a therapist, 3 times for me, twice for my mum, He kicked off with all this OHI su pages RCITs BKRCI mesukhrri bledad/husband. Woeisme. Why are online doing GT high STO make me feel GUILTY. Crap. I mean yeah, a lot of my issues I can't speak for my mum, can be traced back to him, but neither of us would dare ever say as much to him. I was so close to finally being able to move out. Barely our area is expensive to live in, the jobs pay low, and I literally can't learn to drive because of my mental state, so looking for somewhere I can live and work is difficult, but I was almost there. But whoops, my dad's business went under, and he owes the company the house, and has no pension, because he poured it all into keeping his failing business afloat. Now my mum, who has been a housewife for 27 years apart from a few part-time jobs that he still didn't approve of because he was determined that he could support her, has to go back to work in spite of her terrible anxiety and complete loss of confidence, and they rely on my rent. I don't know the first thing about business, but I'm damn sure that his Karen ways had at least something to do with this. My mother is one. So, not married to one, but my dad was. He just ignored her and rarely went anywhere with her. If she was acting up he just stood and waited. We got the law called on us in a Burger King drive-thru because she said the man in the car 2 cars ahead was being rude server, and she got out and wanted to tell him off. We got banned from Kmart because she accused them of not having her layaway, and she threw a massive huge scene about it. Turns out the layaway was at a different store and she forgot. Of course she didn't apologize or admit to being wrong. She has gotten DirecTV to take off half her bill many times. She pays half the total, then calls and throws a fit about her service or their faults, and they credit her the rest. We used to have call and order pay-per-view movies. We completely stopped doing that because every single time she got in a fight with the customer service agent. Every single time. Finally dad just said F it, and we were allowed to order any more because we never got to watch them anyway or we would all be so uncomfortable by the time she was done fighting with a stranger we didn't care. She makes everything she encounters difficult. She had a dog that would eat and destroy the neighbor's landscaping. They called and asked her nicely to leash him. She said no one tells her what to do, it is a free country, and she threw the leash away. When he destroyed more of their property, and they obviously complained, she took the dog and left it in the middle of nowhere, wouldn't tell us where. She said it was the neighbor's fault and they should feel ashamed. She did that with my dog also. She said it hurt her feelings that I was getting married and leaving her, so while I was at work one day, she took my Yorkie and sold it to someone in another county and refused to tell me who to go back and get it. I had had that dog for 5 years. Karens are psychotic. Lol, literally. One of my cousins is a Karen, complete with bob haircut, entitled attitude. She's a stay-at-home mom of 2 now adult children who have left home. She would always post some sort of minor complaint on Facebook about middling little things, and her Karen friends would all chime in and agree. One day, she wrote several paragraphs about how a local drugstore was now charging customers for plastic bags. This was a new thing back then, and pretty well the norm around here now. She went on to write, in detail, about how she summoned a manager, declared she would not pay for bags, 5 cents, and in protest, left all her items on the counter, and stormed off. Her Karen friends were all like, yeah, nobody's charging me for bags either. Against my better judgment, I chimed in, politely, and pointed out that it's not the clerk, the manager, or the store's fault they are charging for plastic bags, and thus they do not deserve someone taking a strip off of them. Never mind leaving all your items for them to have to restock. This was met instantly by 3 Karens, herself included, tearing a strip off of me. 2 of them had no idea who I was, followed quickly by me being blocked on Facebook by not just her, but her husband and 2 kids, at the exact same time. As in, she literally went into her husband and kids' Facebook accounts to block me. That was neat. My mother. No contact for 6 years. The worst person I've ever known. She will ruin anyone's good time because it's not about her. I could go on for days about all the horrible shit she's pulled, but the biggest Karen moment that comes to mind is my nephew's 12th birthday. He wanted Red Lobster for his birthday. All week he talked about it, called all of us every day to make sure we were going. The night arrives and everyone is showing up. It's about 12 of us, and we had the reservation a week in advance. Guess who doesn't show? We call her, and she claims she thought it was an hour later, and she's just not gonna go. Nobody cared. We were all relieved. Everyone is seated, appetizers ordered, and we are laughing. Cue my mom 15 minutes later, storming in, demanding the staff take her to our table. They show her the way, and everyone's smiles just stopped. She starts off by saying how nobody cared she wasn't coming, and made her feel upset. Then she had a server bring her 3 different chairs, because they were uncomfortable. I'll never forget what she ordered either. She got a chicken Caesar salad. It's a dinner portion, and comes with a soup. She complains the entire time about how long it's taking, even though it's faking chicken she ordered. I tell her it's not gonna come out any faster if she keeps complaining, and she stormed out of the place and peeled out of the parking lot after she called me a faking asshole. Once again, nobody cared. The servers bring our food and ask what to do with the salad. We say just box it up and leave it on the table. Everyone is back to enjoying themselves, taking pictures and my nephew opening presents. Right as we ask for the cake to be brought out, my mom comes back into the restaurant, slams her fat ass down on the seat, and rudely asks where her food was. I gave it to her and told her to just shut up the rest of the night. As soon as she opened the box, she exclaimed, "I ordered salmon on this." We all look at her, and my aunt and I simultaneously said, "No you didn't." So of course she takes it to the manager and starts yelling about how they messed up her order, and it was cold. Yes, she complained about a cold salad she left for about 30 minutes. The manager came to our table, and we told her to not change anything, and leave it on the bill, because my mom is just lying. At this point, my nephew began to cry. He was just so over his birthday being ruined, that he just got up, and walked out of the restaurant. After that, my mom has the audacity to blame the staff for ruining his birthday. We paid the bill and left. She started and ate her chicken Caesar salad by herself at the table. My name is Karen, but I'm very shy and hate confrontation. However, my aunt is such a faking Karen. There is a fine difference between being named Karen and acting like one. She embarrassed me and my mom at a Chinese restaurant to the point that I had to get up and cry in the bathroom. She was so rude to the waitress and to the owner. It made me sick. She used to beat the shit out of her kids and give them unusually cruel chores. She's also a thief and really greedy. Her sense of entitlement is out of this world. For my mom's birthday, her brother and sister-in-law sent my mom a day card with money in it on a Visa gift card. My aunt saw it, took it, and didn't tell my mom until she was stepping out the door. She said I took that card because I need it. She didn't ask, she took. I came into some MO right after my father died, and you can believe she was suddenly mine and my sister's best friend. Mostly mine because I overheard her say, "Well, I can't ask Sister X for money. She'll say no." She a bit of a beach, but internal movie would, because she's too nice. I did give her money, $700. She already owes me $2,600, but I told her never ask me again. My aunt, who isn't even named Karen, is a top tier horrible Karen in every meme sense of the word. The other day she borrowed my mother's vehicle because her own is too small. My mom had major back surgery and couldn't dip down into my aunt's small vehicle. So she was only supposed to use it to drop my mom off, no visitors because of COVID, and then pick her back up. The day she was supposed to pick her up, my aunt flew into a pissy rant, so I was told by both my mom and aunt, but two slightly altered versions. My aunt, they made me circle around and around, while unnoticed they were letting the blacks into the pickup area. So I asked a black security guard, what the hell is up with this? My mom told me later that my aunt was in the wrong area for pickup. And then 2 days later my aunt drops my mom's vehicle at our house. Since my mom is staying with a cousin who is a RN, and me and my mom share this vehicle, however, my aunt steps in, gives me the keys, and says gas is cheap, so if you're gonna get it now. I took it as a sign that she didn't put any gas in it, and I was right. She left it just above empty. My mother is a Karen. She would think that everything was hers for a long time. She would steal cash and lie about it. Both me and my brother were 8 and 9, had about $180 between the two of us. Time came to buy ourselves phones. Dad would pay half, and we pay the other half, and we found out that I had no cash. My brother had only $40 to his name. So we never had a phone to use. No biggie. Then mom came back to ask where our cash went. Well, we knew that Amy cash she made was 20% hers. Rest was for household bills, since my dad put all his cash from disability, roughly $1.5k, into the bills himself. So we asked her where she got the cash to buy all this jewelry and all the other miscellaneous items she had in her room. She had a silver vase and other things we sold after she left. I will get to this part soon. Her room and herself was very filthy. You would think that with all the money she would hide from us, she would keep a hold of making sure stuff was clean, but unfortunately she never cleaned it. Dishes would never get done, laundry was never ran through, and so forth. Dishes first. Once I was asked to get a plate out, and when I did picked one, it looked like someone smeared Oreos all over it. I got beat up for approaching her about it. Laundry, well, all our clothes stank for weeks on end before she realized laundry would be done. Overstuff the washer machine and complain that the stuff wasn't coming clean. If we attempted doing either of these, well, when she came home she would yell and curse all three of us out until we wouldn't do any of them, which caused her to get more upset. Let's not even get into detail on her eating, because trying to scarf down a 1/4 pounder in one bite is sickening. Point now for the worst part, her leaving. We lived in Missouri at the time and we knew that nothing would stop her, if given the chance, to go to one of them. We knew about her and her boyfriends because of letters she would make and her texts. Well, she was caught texting her boyfriend when she was 15 that lived in Illinois. Dad caught her, took her phone, asked her for the SIM card which was missing at the moment, and was forced to hand over her phone. She complied, but she had plans to get it back. Both me and my dad went remote control racing. Search for Traxxas Rustler or /4x4. We had fun. This guy crashed my dad's vehicle, but the crasher's vehicle exploded into tiny bits. We went home, lost races, but was a learning experience. When we got home, however, my brother was teary-eyed and was still crying until we asked him if everything was alright. He stammered point, so we didn't press him for further info. A few days later we asked her where her phone was at because we heard her phone go off, notification ping, and she said I don't know. Well, we found it a few days later, and my dad hammered it to bring a statement that marriage is to be eternal. But 3 months passed, and the boyfriend from Illinois picked her up and drove her to his place. She didn't appreciate him because he was too old for her taste, which my dad even told her that the guy's brother was his friend who was 2 years older than him, and the guy was 15 years older than him. My father is 8 years older than her, FYI. She begged to come back, we complied. She left another time and came back herself after a while later. Then she got into an argument with me, which during the time she left I had cash and was training for boxing for fun. When she got into my face, my brother tried to remain the neutral party, but all my anger I had boiled over. I shoved him to the side, took blows from my mother, who didn't understand that I was laughing maniacally in my head while yelling back at her. I'm a left-handed person, able to knock someone out with 1 to 2 hits if they properly connect. My right was generally a lot weaker than my left, but I had no space for my left to hit her. So I connected a strong right and she backed off, yelling and accusing me for hurting her. My father was definitely a lot tougher than her, so I ran to my top bunk of the bed. My father told me to come down and apologize. Did I? I really don't know, but I was congratulated for standing my ground. She left once more a few days later, but then came back. My father, being a nice person on her birthday, paid for lunch, enjoying the time with her. He even asked her what she wanted for dinner and went to pick us up from middle school. After we got picked up, he drove to buy a dozen roses for her. We came home and she was gone again. Back at Illinois. No reason for her to go. My dad, swearing revenge, bought a pistol, then a rifle, then other guns. I was scared of the household that I stayed at. She came back 5 days before Christmas. On the 23rd she announced to us she found a lifelong friend who was going back to their rich family in Texas. We were drained of cash, so my brother and I told her good luck, but my father told her to sit at the big table. He pulled a pistol and set it on the table and said that if she wants to leave, she can, but do not ever come back. She left at 12:30 a.m. to catch a ride to a Greyhound bus to Texas on the 25th, 2 months after her friend was given cash to leave, and her parents gave her two options: be given $300 to go to her friend, allowed to stay, but pay $100 at the end of every week. She chose the $300 path. She called my dad to come say goodbye to her, for she was going back to Illinois to her friend. All the while her mother was dying. She called us to let her know not to leave family, and she gave us a mysterious number sequence that we forgot about that would lead to her very much alive father. We shared our mom the clip and she immediately burst into tears saying she was going to her mom. But she never paid attention to never leave family part. So when she came to see her, her mother was already dead. She was 64 years old. Just writing this makes me wanna cry. My mother has never returned, and it has been almost 7 years since she has been gone. She is still alive and tries to call us every once in a while. My brother blew up on her. I remain neutral, and my father is either neutral or heavily negative. All in all, stay with family. Don't turn your backs to those who love you. Not married to one, but my mom was one for a while. When I was really young she was great, but when my family moved to a new location, things soured really quickly. She was also diagnosed with fibromyalgia and arthritis, while she also struggled with pretty severe bouts of depression. These combined were likely unbearable to her, so I try to be empathetic about it. I don't remember a ton from that time in my life, so no specific stories. I do remember very clearly how much she could go from 0 to 100. It was embarrassing to bring her anywhere when she actually did leave the house, complained about any and everything. Being 13, my mom and I were at war because of it. Near constant fighting and avoiding each other for weeks at a time. My dad was smart about it though. He would take the initiative to talk to the manager or whoever calmly and nicely for my mom. My dad, the most genuinely nice person you could ever meet, did everything he could to keep her from taking it out on other people. Worse yet, she took her rage out on him when he came home from work. Yell at him for every tiny thing. I even saw her slap him across the face when he came home late from work. Soon after, struggling around this time due to my dad having to freelance after losing his job. He never broke though, which is unbelievable from my point of view. He knew she was still in there somehow. What kills me more than anything, my dad has told me he takes responsibility for all of it because his job was what made us move in the first place. Killed my relationship with my older sisters too because they were off at college, and when they visited again, my mom's rage would subside for a few days. As soon as they left she would go back to it again, breeding some jealousy in my that I struggled with for years. Eventually, she had a complete 180 after I left for the military and my sisters moved to the area. We've started to repair our relationship since then. I'm out now, and I've moved nearby to my parents and things have been much better. My relationship with her isn't the same, but we've been working on it slowly. She doesn't flip out on everyone or go nuts, but still tends to be really irritable at times. Overall 1/10 wouldn't recommend the experience of living with a Karen. Not married to one, but my mom definitely is. Her Karenness usually doesn't come out too much in public, but it is a vicious creature at home. Thankfully, I don't live at home now, but when I did it was an absolute nightmare. Nothing was ever good enough for her. Everything had to be her way, and she constantly has to badmouth all of her relatives, usually my dad behind his back, and friends to anyone who'll listen. Currently, we are trying to plan my wedding amid all of the COVID nastiness. I only took her with me to pick out my dress, because offending her by not inviting her would be worse, and she threw a fit at me when I wouldn't let the rest of her entourage, half of her extended family, come because of the store's COVID restrictions. Now my younger sister is also engaged, and my mom is trying her best to make sure that she gets her way, because she knows that she can walk all over my sister when I'm not there to stand up to her. I'm the oldest. My fiance thinks she's hilarious and tries to occasionally give her a taste of her own medicine. Fortunately, we also live an hour away. My dad has dealt with her in the same way for the last 13 years, since losing his hearing. He takes off his implant and gives her the true silent treatment. That man is a hero for putting up with her for 25 plus years, and if they ever divorce, I'm on his side. Oh yeah, and the best part? Her mother and daughter, me, are named Karen, and my grandma is the sweetest lady in the whole world. Apparently, Karen-ness skips a generation. Hope I'm not too late but not married, but my aunt most definitely is. Little bit of backstory cause this may be a little bit long. She's the oldest of 5 girls. I was born to the middle child. Every time we go out she always treats everyone like absolute crap, and when something is not up to her standards she goes absolutely off it with everyone. I don't think we've ever been to a restaurant or store without her needing to see the manager. She's also very high maintenance. Whenever the family goes on holidays or trips together she has to bring so much stuff, and she always carries some absolutely ridiculous stuff that just isn't needed in her purse. It literally took her an hour and a half to get to the swimming pool, and she was there for 15 minutes before everyone wanted to leave because she was constantly shouting at her son and her husband. Also, another piece of info you might need. My mother was a single mother till I was 7. She worked 3 jobs to help pay for my school dinners and clothes, but up until she remarried my stepfather I lived at my grandma's, which would obviously lead to me and my grandma being the closest relationship in the entire family. I'm the only grandchild that sees her at least 3 times a week, obviously not during quarantine, which makes me VV sad. She is like my second mother, and when I was in school I got the bus to hers on Fridays. I slept at hers every Saturday and Sunday night, and she would drop me at school on Mondays. So you guess we were very close. One of the funniest incidents we had was I was sleeping at my grandma's on a Saturday night. I was around 14 at the time, but that night she was making dinner for the whole family. We had all 5 children and all their kids round for dinner except for my mother and stepfather and the second youngest mother, but all the grandchildren were there anyways. I barely even remember what we were playing. But my cousin, Karen's son, is very entitled and spoiled, demanded that he be in charge, bearing in mind has the second youngest of 8 kids, screeching that he needed to be in charge, but has very clumsy and small, so we decided to use a random name picker on my grandfather's very old iPad. Of course, it didn't pick him, so he threw an absolute fit telling all of us we could die, and we are the worst human beings on earth, and how much he hated us. No adults were present and the oldest cousin was downstairs in the garden, making me the oldest in the room of 3, 5, 8, 11, and me being 14. His mother heard the screaming and came running upstairs. The 11-year-old says Auntie Karen is coming, and we all look at the door expecting her. As soon as she opens the door her son bursts into floods of crocodile tears and tells her we had been bullying him, so she believes him because he's always right and an absolute angel in her eyes. She looks up at me and proceeds to stand up and shout in my face, "You're the oldest in this room, you should know not to be nasty to your family members, you too." 11-year-old's name, "You should know better," to which I said calmly and quietly, bearing in mind I was a very introverted and quiet child, "We didn't do that," to which she replied with, "Well, my son said you did, so I believe him." She then proceeds to stand up, dump her son on the floor with no gentleness at all, and scream, "Gio, and get your coat and shoes, I'm driving you home, and I don't care. If there's no one in your house you can sit on the doorstep and starve, you don't deserve to have your grandparents' food." We all stood in shock, the 2-3-year-olds crying, and the 11-year-old trying to leave the room, but Karen stopping her. Then, like the badass she is, my grandma replies calmly, smiling to herself, "You aren't taking her anywhere. She's not your child. Please Karen just take you, your husband, and your son home. I don't want to deal with you tonight." All in all, they went home, and the twins had calmed down, and we had a lovely dinner. Sorry this is extremely long, but the whole family laughs about this every time we see each other. My aunt is a literal Karen. Right down to her name actually being Karen. And my god, she is truly awful. As a child, and through into her teens, she would have temper tantrums so intense over not getting her way, that she would faking stomp her feet and scream until her nose started goddamn bleeding. As a teenager, this was confirmed by her mother, father, and siblings. I've heard the story from every one of them. The past few years have seen her mental health steadily decline, and she's pretty much completely faking off her rocker. My entire family had to disown her. They couldn't take her abuse anymore. She began yelling and screaming every chance she got about perceived slights from decades ago, with many things from 30, 40 plus years ago. Shit that happened when my mom and her were teens living at home. Shit that happened when they were in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. All completely fabricated issues that she 100% believes. One such issue she goes on and on and on about is how her rich parents, they aren't rich, but were pretty well off, never helped her financially, like they'd helped her siblings, my mom, other aunt, and my uncle. My grandparents helped each of their children buy a small, very modest house. My one aunt, the awesome, super chill one, was a single mother to 3 kids, and so she got the most help. Grandparents straight up bought a house for her and her kids to live in, and she just needed to pay them rent for it. My mom and uncle got help too, just not as much. Point now, the way my aunt tells the story, you'd think her parents told her to go fuck herself while showering money and gifts on everyone but her. Here's the thing, she married a man who made more money than everyone else, and when she divorced him after 13 years for being abusive, she was a single mom with 2 kids, sure, but her kids were nearly teens and didn't need daycare. She landed a high-paying job and ended up making more money than all of her siblings, enough to buy a big fancy house. Turns out though, that big fancy house that she always claimed she bought all by herself was mostly paid for by my grandparents. They did so on the condition that they would stay at her house anytime they came to town to visit. But y'all, she never got any help from anyone ever. The last time my grandma tried to have her over, my auntie Karen literally left screaming about how she never got any help, never got money from them, and called my grandma every bad name you can think of. Ended it with obscenities and a fuck you for good measure. No one has spoken to her since, my parents having broke contact with her years ago over money she owed them. It was about $200, and when my mom asked for it again, after having asked her several times before, Auntie Karen absolutely lost her shit and started screaming about no one ever helping her with money. My dad had to escort her off the property. Point funny, my grandma, after the last incident with Auntie Karen, proceeded to give each of her children, except her, $10,000 for Christmas. She told me this with a gleam in her eyes and a smirk. Point I love my grandma. Not married to one, but my grandmother on my dad's side is I didn't meet her till I was 16. At that age I never understood the term Karen as it is used today. Point out of all the horrible people I have dealt with in my life, she remains to be the worst. Not the typical let me talk to your manager antics, unfortunately a lot worse. She did some of the worst things imaginable to me. My dad was addicted to heroin most of his life and the entire time I knew him, and she did nothing but enable him. She would house him whenever he got out of jail for stealing, give him money, despite the fact she knew it would be spent on drugs. Whenever I would call her for help because I found needles in my dad's possession, she'd threaten me or someone I lived with. One time, she called my friend's bank and had his car impounded. He owed money just because I wanted my dad to get better. I never understood her logic or reasoning behind any of her actions. Nothing ever made sense. It was as if she just didn't like me. This took me many years to realize. Point she would accuse me of betraying my dad whenever I wanted him to go to a rehab facility. The worst thing she ever did I will never forget or find closure on. I found out from my mother through a government letter sent her stating that back child support funding would cease because my dad had passed away. The date of his death was a year prior according to this letter. My grandmother never told me. Later I find out that she supplied him with morphine to support his addiction. This is what killed him. She awoke the next morning to find his body on the living room floor. My father had a will that she kept from me and my siblings. I will never get the closure I need from his death, and I cannot find my grandmother to confront her. No clue what I'd say anyway. By the way, her name is literally Karen. We actually have a male family friend that's pretty much a Karen. He's very demanding and demeaning towards any service workers, and anytime things don't go his way, he's going to ask for the manager or lie about how the owner is his good friend and he should be treated better. We've actually decided that we are not going to restaurants with him anymore. He always asks for something special or will want an amalgamation of different components from dishes. That may fly up some restaurants, but not all. He always orders lamb and asks for a side of mint jelly, regardless of whether the jelly part is on the menu. When the waiters inevitably tell him they don't have mint jelly, he blows up about how they could serve lamb without mint jelly. He always acts like he's being victimized through all of this and becomes pouty through the dinner. It's absolutely embarrassing. A funny story, my sister was working at a bakery and he came in to get some bread. They had met before, but weren't super well acquainted. My sister recognized him, but he didn't recognize her. He started berating her when his favorite type of bread wasn't on the shelves. She told him that there was actually some in the back, and she'd go get him some. His response? "Make sure you bring lots. You have to empty hands, you know." My sister laughed it off, but we called him out on it later, and he completely bst some story and about how they had a good chat. My father-in-law is as Karen as they come. To the point where I dread his presence at any activity that involves service workers of any category. Easily 80% of meals at restaurants involve at least one request to speak to the manager. He spent his career managing several chain restaurants, and so he is super critical of restaurant service. His most common pet peeve is when the main course comes out too soon after the salad/soup. Now, he'll usually ask the server not to bring one right after the other, and sometimes it goes smoothly. But other times, the busy server or runner will bring the food within a few minutes of the salad, and you can see the annoyance spread across his face. At that point, it's almost a certainty that he'll be asking for a manager and there will be something taken off the bill. He's rarely ever outright rude or mean, just crabby, but his years in restaurant management has taught him the words and phrases to use to get the maximum results. It's not only restaurants though. Any industry that has a strong customer service side is a potential victim. We were at a large Florida amusement park and 2 of the larger rides went down for mechanical issues. There were plenty of other rides open, but he took notice of those 2. At the end of our visit, he stopped by guest services while we waited outside. I can only imagine the conversation inside, but he walked out with free passes for the whole group that were good for a whole year. My S/O dad is a straight up Karen. He's constantly making an ass of himself in these petty ways. His wife, S/O stepmom, is a saint who cooks beautiful meals and cleans everything up, and she can never do anything right. She can't even tell us her own stories right. Even when she's got us all in stitches, he's sitting there furrowing his brow trying to think of something shitty to say to her, and if he can't think of something he just talks over her. One time there was a bunch of us at their house and we ordered sushi from a very sweet well-known restaurant in town, and for some reason he opened a bag and decided they forgot a roll, so he calls them in front of everyone like he's in his own stupid show of some kind, acts like a complete child, yelling and demanding they give us our money back because this is such an inconvenience to him, only to go silent when his daughter shows him everything was in fact there. His kids are almost scared of him, so I was the only one to laugh and roll my eyes, which then caused me to get the death glare. But fuck, oh well, if you're going to act like a fuckhead, I'm not going to let you feel okay about it. That sort of situation happens every single time we see them. Oh god, I can't even get into going into public with him. He's such a phony, tail between his legs, sad little beach of a male. He's not a man to me when he wants to make a good impression. He's the absolute worst, and it's really just taught me to let shit go and not let someone's terrible faking attitude get under my skin. I was married to a Karen. She was so Karen that long before the Karen meme took off, our family and friends referred to Karen-esque behavior by my wife's name. In addition to being an ass in public, she also treated me and our kids like shit. According to her, everything negative in her life was because of me, and not because she spent her life doing nothing but watching TV, playing games on her phone, eating, and bitching at me and the kids. Eventually it got bad enough that I initiated a divorce. She was genuinely shocked when confronted with consequences for treating everyone like shit for years. She asked what she could do to save the marriage. I told her to go see a psychologist and tell the doctor that she is about to lose everything good in her life because of her extreme self-centeredness. It worked. Somehow the psychologist got through to her. She took responsibility for the harm she'd done and started acting with empathy towards most people. She became a non-Karen and now uses her powers of conflict affinity for good to right wrongs and help people that can't stand up for themselves. TLDR, married a Karen. She was a beach. Told her to pick being a beach or me and the kids. She reinvented herself and now Karen's for good. My grandmother is a Karen. My grandfather was an absolutely wonderful person with the patience of a saint, and one of only about 4 people who could ever rein her in, the other 3 being her sisters. I distinctly remember one Karen incident where my grandparents took me, my mom, and my sister out to dinner at a nice steak restaurant when I was a kid. Since there were 5 of us, and it was a busy night, there was probably about a 45-minute wait for a table. This didn't sit well with Nana. About 10 minutes into our wait, she started periodically pestering the poor hostess who was doing a pretty good job of calming her down. Unfortunately for her, at one point Nana noticed a couple who came in after us get seated before us. Obviously, this was because a two-top opened up before a larger table that could accommodate us. Most reasonable people would realize this. Nana was not in a mood to be reasonable. She started laying into the poor girl who was getting more and more flustered. My grandfather just kind of sighed and started to get up to intervene, and my mom said to him, "If she's not careful, they're going to spit in our food." My grandfather just chuckled and said, "I bet we've eaten a lot of that." Then he went to calm Nana down and mentally prepared himself for the large tip he was going to have to leave for our server, because not all heroes wear capes. Not married to a Karen, but my brother is. I don't talk to him anymore because of it, since I cannot stand being around people like that. He has always been a bit of a pushover. If you're the type of person to always give second chances, then you'll eventually get used to being treated like shit and not get rid of the person because it's just kind of what you're used to. I also know he hates dating and doesn't like being single. He likes being in relationships, so if she doesn't break up with him, he most likely won't, unless she cheats on him. I don't know what the fuck his standards are, but he didn't break up with a girl because she cheated, so I think that's his line. 2 things he told me that I never forgot. You want your partner to treat you like a queen and to always give you whatever you want. You want them to admit you're always right and to take the fault, even when you know it's not your fault, because that's what the man of the relationship should do. I answered back that I didn't want a slave as a partner, that I wanted my significant other to be an equal and to tell me when I'm wrong. He kind of just laughed it off. Enjoy being single right now. One day you'll be in a relationship and you'll wish you could be alone. I've been in a relationship for almost 2 years now and have never felt that way, so I don't know why he looked so sad and pained like he wanted to escape. I don't know. It must be super weird and like a personalized prison though. Not married to one, but lived with one for a year. We lived in a gated complex with security and shared a bedroom. Not dating, just roommates, thank goodness. Our neighbors were having a party around 9 to 10 p.m. Just having a good time. That really pissed her off, so she called up security and demanded that they go shut the party down so she could sleep. Our complex had rules about parties that they couldn't go after 11 p.m. out of courtesy, and since it was early there was nothing security could do. She lost her mind at the poor guy on the phone when he told her as much, calling him worthless, pathetic, basically every awful thing she could think of. I ended up going down to the security office just to apologize on her behalf. He was really nice and really appreciated the apology, even though it hadn't come from her. I felt so awful about the whole thing for days. Everything got worse when my other roommates told her what I'd done a few days later. She ended up cornering me in the kitchen screaming about how I had humiliated her, that I owed her an apology, that she did nothing wrong, and I was bullying her etc. She legitimately was purple in the face, spit flying everywhere, eyes all bulged out. It was terrifying. I ended up telling her that she absolutely did do something wrong, and that I refused to apologize to her just because she was feeling guilty about being a rancid person. She reported me and our other roommates to security not long after, citing that we made her feel unsafe and that we wouldn't let her sleep. Security remembered her and ended up vouching for me and my roommates. She was kicked out not long after. I found out later that her fiancé had also dumped her because she was emotionally abusive, and because we'd all been living in the complex as interns for a company, her leaving cost her her job. That in turn cost her her scholarship to her school, and she went back home to live with her parents, jobless, alone, with no financial aid for school. Karma really bit her in the ass, and twisted. I've got about 1,000,003 stories about her. She was a terrifying and stressful person to live with, and I genuinely hope she's gotten some help and turned herself around. Hopefully all of this was enough to kickstart her becoming a better person. TLDR, my aunt is a Karen. I saw it in small batches and did my best to stay away from crazy. My aunt is a Karen, and here are a few stories. I spent a month as a kid at her house, cause I wanted to spend time with my cousin. They lived close by up until I was about 7, and we were like brothers before they moved. I believe it was the next year, I asked my mother to stay at their house for the summer break. I didn't last but about 4 weeks, and I begged my mother to come get me. I may have cried, but whatever. I just remember her screaming all the time, not just to strangers, but to my cousin and uncle. She did not yell at me cause I did my best to not get targeted by her. It was hell to be around though. In my mid-teens, about 1998 or 1999, they moved closer to us again. I did my best not to hang out with her. I do recall going to Walmart once with her. She wanted to return something, and, at the time, Walmart's return policy was limited to 30 days and you have to have a receipt. Before we got there we were chatting in the car, and she tells me that she is over 30 days from purchase for the item and she didn't have the receipt. She said she was going to show me a trick to get her money back. We are in line at the return desk. She gets up to the cashier, gives them the item, and says she wants her money back. They ask for a receipt and she says she doesn't have it. They tell her they cannot accept, and she says she wants her money back. They go back and forth, and a manager is called. He says THS same thing. She raises her voice as I realize what is happening, and I slowly leave her side in the line. I stand just in sight of the whole shit show outside the return area. It felt like an eternity, but they eventually gave her cash and we walk back to the car. She had an attitude like she conquered Walmart on the way back to her house. My uncle divorced her a few years later, but they were in and out of a relationship until he passed a few years ago. She has gotten worse as she gotten older. She moved back to South Florida to the rest of the family, and she torments them weekly. The family has put their foot down to stop her from all the drama she causes. When she was not getting her way, she started to call authority agencies on the family like the police or family services. Supposedly one of them investigated the family and told her not to contact them again because she was being a nuisance. I have a lot of stories about her, but most of them are secondhand now. Like another one is, when she went to Spain, ran out of money, we lost contact with her for several months. Family thought she got herself killed, and then she shows up back in the States somehow. She says she was homeless for a while, but who knows what the fuck happened. Either way, for the past 15 years I've ignored any number with 305 or 954 area code because of her. She has sent message threads telling random shit and I just ignore them. She has gotten the hint I'm not faking around with her or the family as long as she is around. I had an ex that was a Karen. If anything was wrong with the food at a restaurant, she'd make a scene and treat the waitstaff like shit, then would insist we don't tip. This is something I never do under any circumstances. I hated it so much that eventually I'd just leave the restaurant. If she started this up, she'd get drunk and start fights with people and then try to drag me into it. Picked fights with my family and stole from them to the point they, understandably, didn't want anything to do with me by association. She couldn't hang on to a friend for more than a few months before there was some blow up about some inane bullshit. This was usually a mutual issue as only other Karens could even spend that much time with her. She spent money like it was nothing while we were broke and never really pitched in equally. Always between jobs or didn't want to pick up extra shifts to help get us out of the spot we were in, but always expected me to be doing it. She had a lot of issues and was extremely manipulative. Really bad upbringing by her scumbag father and an absent mother. Absolutely no self-confidence. Multiple suicide attempts. Likely undiagnosed bipolar or similar, but always refused to seek help. None of them excuse the behavior, but my empathy and pity kept me there longer than I should have been. I kid you not, this quarantine has made me want to break up with my girlfriend. No, I'm not being serious. I love my girlfriend to death, but her sister is so god faking awful. Her mom too, but her sister is like Karen on crack and she's faking 17. It's ridiculous. I eat dinner at their house most nights. My girlfriend and I have been dating for a while now. We are just college students and can't support ourselves for obvious reasons yet. So, I'd say every single night her sister flips out about something. Here is a little list of things she's flipped out on since this past Monday. So 3 dinners lol. Her mom picked up a piece of chicken that fell on the tablecloth and ate it instead of throwing it out. Flipped out screaming point, she gave my girlfriend a hug on her birthday, but accidental head butted my girlfriend, and she said oh, sister freaks out that she doesn't show her any love. She uses her mom's Facebook, because my Facebook is just all ghetto beaches from school and it's annoying and gross. I like yours with babies and puppies. We went to play Mexican Train after dinner one night. She flipped out and stopped playing because her mom played a song she didn't like. Point, everything is always everyone's fault but hers, and all she does is complain and talk shit about PPL. I don't get how PPL live like her. I really don't understand how someone can just be so annoying and always have stuff to complain about. I literally can't even bring myself to visit my girlfriend sometimes because I don't want to put up with her sister. Her mom is a Karen too, but a veteran, and definitely not as bad. The sister is a Karen to be, and it's worse because she doesn't know how to use her Karen impulses, yet so they are just all over the place. My girlfriend's mother is a Karen for sure. She's a jobless alcoholic whose rich inherited boyfriend gives her a credit card to literally just fuck off all day and leave him alone, yet for some reason she thinks she's entitled to almost everything and anything, especially from her daughter, who she is constantly narcissistic towards. Her daughter has a degree, a great job, and has made a great life for herself, but somehow everything that happens to her mom is her fault. She got wasted at the bar per usual and decided to drive home, hit a parked car, and got a DUI. While being arrested, was yelling at the cops to speak to their captain, while also yelling at her daughter, you better come bail me out, at the same time point when she had to move out of her house because her boyfriend refused to keep paying her rent. Their relationship is shit. Long story, she demanded that her daughter and I rent a U-Haul to come pick up half her house and move her junk into our new home. My girlfriend has a hard time saying no because it's her mom. When I finally drew the line and told her I was not taking her old 1940s furniture to my brand new house, which is already furnished, let alone helping more like doing all of it, move, she flipped out and tells me I'm ungrateful. Point, ungrateful for what exactly? I'm still not sure. Point, she needs help. My mother and mother-in-law are both certified Karens. My mom was really bad growing up. The cringy, can we just go please type of bad. Point, however, she did have her good Karen moments. Like when I bought my first new car. It was my first adult purchase, so I called her to come make sure I wasn't signing my life away. She was a data analyst for the federal government for 30 plus years. Numbers were kinda her thing. She comes down, sees that the brand new car has 900 miles on it, and demands the used sticker price, citing that a new car isn't a car with 900 miles on it. They of course refused. She held her ground, and when they wouldn't budge, we stood up together and went to walk out. They took the bait, and while we didn't get the full used price, they dropped the price considerably. Few years before that, she walked from a dealership when purchasing herself a brand new car with cash, won from a court settlement, over $100. Went to the dealership down the street, got it for $2,000 less. Lol. Point, I'd like to say she's gotten better, but she really hasn't. Despite me and my siblings constantly pointing it out, she still has terrible Karen behaviors. We call her out when she does it and apologize profusely. Some people just never want to believe they are in the wrong. Point, my mother-in-law basically treats my father-in-law like trash. He cheated on my wife's mother with her, so we say he deserves it, but she really isn't a good person, and it makes me sad for our future kids, because they will only get to have one good step grandma, my dad's saint of a wife, and one good biological grandmother. I also inherited some of my mum's Karen traits, but I swear, I do it in the nicest way possible, and it's only very specific incidents. I can't stand cold food. I just can't. Not when I'm in a restaurant and paying a premium price to be served said food. My wife also has a very serious shellfish allergy. So, when our food comes out cold, I always ask my wife first if she's comfortable with me saying something. She's a bit socially anxious. If she is, I always start with, hey, I know it's probably the kitchen's fault, but is there any way this could be remade? It's pretty cold, and I don't mind waiting. Usually, the service staff is pretty empathetic and gets just as mad at the situation as I am. We've had a few outrageous things happen where I've asked for a manager, my wife drinking out of a chipped beer glass, where the piece of glass was literally floating in the drink, a large piece of plastic found in our shared salad, the prep sticker for the meat found in a wrap we ordered, a piece of shrimp, which could kill my wife, mixed in with our chips, etc. But every time I'm always over the top nice and tip very well. Because I hate being a thorn in someone's side. My mother is a Karen and my father was a merchant marine. As a merchant marine he was required to be deployed for at least 10 consecutive months. When I was young it was 10 on 2 off, and it sucked. When he was home, all she would do is beach at him to do X or Y. Why haven't you done it yet? You never finish anything, you faking idiot, this Jew badge, all that. We were called Japs, Jewish American princes. As I got older his time deployed went from 10 months to 18 months and 2 off. He retired a few years back with a year and a half of vacation time and 5 years of sick leave. They cut him a check for $360,000 after taxes. She was constantly beaching about him spending money. It was excessive, but he was the sole income. He spent money as an outlet to be happy. Restaurants were fun. If they messed something up, she would point out how it was wrong, then shove/toss the plate for dramatic effect. Then we wouldn't go back there for a year or two. Only a few restaurants were free from her tantrums, usually ones where she was friends with staff or owner. Her friends were the worst, enabling moochers. A bunch of women either divorced or so horrible only the most detestable men would date them. They would constantly come over to the house openly criticizing him in conversions while he was in the other room, in his own house. Constantly going out to eat together, and my mother footing the bill, always. My father called them the man-hater club. That was a fun fight, but at that point he didn't care. I have no idea why they stayed married outside of my father not wanting to pay get a cent divorce. I had sure to go to college 6 hours away because any closer, and I might have been expected to be home more often. Edit. A year ago I told her she was the most critical person I knew. She hung up the phone on me. 2 days later she called and then argued that she was the last critical person I know for like an hour. When she calls me it isn't hello, how are you? It's you're never going to believe what your father did. My aunt is a Karen, as well as an ex. The aunt is actually named Pam, but everyone knows she's a total Karen. She will literally complain about things at family events like weddings and birthdays, and has already caused massive rifts in the family, where some parts won't even come if other members are there. She kicked her daughter out within a week of it being legal. 15. The sun shines out of her son's ass, and even now she has massive respect for her son, who was handed everything from his job to a fake house on a silver platter. Yet the daughter, who educated herself, raised a family, and has become pretty damn successful in her field, is just a lazy useless beach. My uncle just sorta resigned himself to a life with her by this point. He used to always stick up for her. I remember a few particular arguments he got pretty aggressive defending her, but now just makes a noise and removes himself. He is in his 50s though. The ex though, seriously worst person I ever met. Just the most scummy person ever, but she's been paying for it since everyone stopped covering for her. I'm talking commits credit card fraud against her best friend, pretends to have medical issues when she doesn't, ran someone on a bike down, and kept going. Piece of human shit. Thing is, she's a master manipulator. She'll draw you in acting one way, then slowly start turning batshit crazy. She's been banned from so many shops it's not even funny anymore, usually with cops there. She's got a severe mental disorder, but refuses to even acknowledge the diagnosis, so she hasn't gotten any better. From what I know of her at the moment, She's currently waiting until the covered lockdown ends for the first of her at least 3 current court summons. One of those is my court case. Haven't dated her for a decade and the woman thought she had some right to almost 15k of my tax money and claimed it. My mom was a Karen despite being not white, not that she ever acknowledged her heritage, but W/E, and my stepdad was absolutely miserable being married to her. He would constantly deal with her yelling at workers' places, and treating her kids and everyone around her like shit, and wondering why nobody liked her. She would constantly put her political activism above the family and she constantly goes on narcissistic rants on Facebook about how important she is, because she's practically famous. It got to the point where my stepdad was too fed up with her abuse and started speaking up about it, and she threatened to take the kids and make sure he'd never see them again, which ended up shutting him up because he had nearly the same thing happen with his oldest, and it took a toll on him. Ironically, 3 years later she decided she was sick of putting her career on hold because she has kids, not that she ever cared about them, and divorced him, giving him full custody. Even further ironically, because I told a few of her political buddies how shitty she was, one of them was my boss, and she can't get any work anywhere on the West Coast. Now she's shambling around the country with whatever money she can scrounge up trying to get employed somewhere, and failing miserably, because everyone can smell her attitude and entitlement miles away. No one in our family will even let her stay with them, and we're pretty sure she's either couch surfing or homeless right now. My first wife, 7 years, was a Karen. It's not great. Usually your hands are so full trying to manage the crisis at home you don't have time to really even care how she interfaces with the outside world. You have friendships with other couples that tend to be weirdly close quickly, but end very quickly as well. I remember having to run interference with other family members, calling them after she'd chewed them out on the phone to apologize. Everybody in the family put up with it because they loved me, but they sure let me know how they felt after the divorce. I really appreciate what they went through for me. Any friend I had previous to our marriage she saw as a threat, so was super rude to those guys' wives. You can't really have friends when you're married to a Karen, because anyone you are friends with on an individual level is a threat, and anyone you become friends with as a couple gets destroyed at some point. The only upside: she got free stuff constantly. That I want to talk to your manager stuff works. If you are shameless and irrational enough, people write off the loss. We got appliances free because she kept finding defects when they were delivered. She got out of tickets. She got into her head where she thought the temperature reading should be on the car and made the mechanic do thousands of dollars of free work chasing a problem that didn't exist. My god, I do not miss that woman. It taught me a lot about what to value in a partner. My wife now, 18 years, is one of the nicest people I know. I went for nice, and I do not regret it. My soon-to-be wife is something from heaven, a complete angel. Which is why I was completely caught off guard when not one, but both her sisters were Karens. I'll give you one story that pretty much broke the camel's back. During college when we're dating, her parents took us, the younger Karen and her boyfriend at the time, down to a week-long beach vacation. Since we were dating I wanted to be on my best behavior, and I for sure held back on unloading on her sister. First we drive there and she's smoking, driving like shit, and throwing Starbucks cups out the window during the 3-hour drive. We get to the hotel, and she demands the other bed, so we got this couch long enough to be a bed, which was actually great, since I got to really cuddle my wife. Lol. The mere fact that she demanded it and wasn't open for discussion was the second clue. The one that really pissed me off was me and her boyfriend actually got along great. We hit the gym together while we're there, the bars, and a bunch of a beer. Generally a good time. She had this moop face the whole time, kinda like how Squidward saw SpongeBob and Patrick having fun meme. After all the fun we went out to eat, and I made a simple joke about her boyfriend talking to a girl at the gym, which he did. Something about a squat rack being used, nothing to constitute jealousy. What a mistake. Rest of the trip was absolutely ruined by her. Complete drain the rest of the trip. Her boyfriend wouldn't talk to me or want to have a drink with me. That was only day 2, and we had 5 days left. Me and my girl still had a great time, but we had to leave I think by day 4, because we had work to do up here. We are saying goodbye to everyone, and the sister completely ignores us right in front of her parents, and they shrug their shoulders like, oh well, what are we going to do? We come back home, and the next week follows. Her parents want to talk to us, and ask that we apologize to her for making her angry. I couldn't believe it. I didn't apologize, but my wife did for the both of us. We don't really go to her family, as I can kind of tell she rather not, and her sisters are draining. It's a shame cause my in-laws are great, we get along amazing. The older one has since moved back, but they both do the same things: demand food, money, and resources from parents. No please, or thank yous, constantly in a bad mood attitude to parents that my parents would absolutely beat out of me even as I get closer to my 30s. Lol, bully my wife. This one is probably the most infuriating, as she's sweet as sugar. She stands up to them now, but I'd like to see more, which she is working on. I don't intervene, as if I do I don't think I'll hold back, and I don't want to ruin the relationship with her parents. My mother's a Karen. She did a lot of good things, but her true self is Karen, so I told her I won't have a relationship with her until she sees a doctor for her Karen behavior. It's ridiculous. We barely talk. I write this message in the hopes that people like my in-laws or mom see this and do a better job growing up children. My mom's only a half Karen. She's not anti-vax or a flat earther, but the half of her that is Karen is horrific. She's brutal to employees, especially with customer service on phones. For example, if your Wi-Fi isn't working and you call the company to help, if the employee suggests something and it doesn't work, she goes off. She screams at them that they're useless, that she's been working her ass off for 10 hours already, that day to support her kids and she doesn't have time for their bullshit. She screams, give me your name and let me speak to your manager. I won't stop till you get fired. Then she repeats the process with the manager. Essentially she can't control herself, so she takes her anger about the issue not being solved on the employees. It's sad point anyways. Story time. Once, she took me to the doctor to get vaccinated. I think I was around 12 and the nurse came in, gave me the shot, and left. She was super quick, and we were out in no time. Then on the way home, my mom was pissed, so I asked what was wrong. She was furious that the nurse didn't smile or ask me how my day was. I explained to my mom that it's not her job to smile or be super extra friendly. It was her job to give me the shot, and that was that, and she did it fine. Then my mom yelled at me that you can't work with people if you don't want to be friendly towards them. I repeated what I said and said that the nurse wasn't unfriendly. She's a nurse. She has more important things to do than skip around and spend time babbling with people. I'm not saying that a nurse who does smile or is super peppy is a bad thing. I'm saying that it's not an issue if a nurse isn't smiling while she sticks a needle in your arm. Maybe she had a bad day. Maybe it's just her personality. Either way, don't force what you think a person should be onto other people. Let them live. If you're so salty, become a nurse yourself. I wouldn't say my mother is a Karen per se, however she has Karen-like tendencies. As a child I would have to stay behind an extra minute or two to apologize for her anytime we left a store, because I always felt overwhelming guilt over the way she treated employees. The worst time I can remember was a couple of summers ago when my dad went to hair cuttery to get his hair cut. She went with him to tell the hairdresser how she wanted it, because my dad legit doesn't care. The hairdresser was clearly new and learning, and I'll admit gave him a bit of an ugly cut. But my dad was fine with it and was ready to go and pay. However, my mom decided she wanted to yell at this poor girl for trying her best to do what she asked for. My dad told her to go to the car a couple of times and just let him deal with the situation, because hair grows back and he didn't even think it was that bad. My mom screamed at her, and my dad had enough and said for her to stop embarrassing him in every establishment we enter, and that it's his hair and he thinks the haircut is fantastic, and told her to go to the car. Then he profusely apologized to the hairdresser and tipped her well and promised he wouldn't let my mom come to store again if he was still allowed to come. Since then, my dad has gone in alone or with me to get his haircut and just waits for her to bitch about it at home so he can spare anyone else from her drama. Not married to one, but worked with one. Years ago, I worked at a large hospital/healthcare organization as a trainer teaching all the touchy-feely stuff, not clinical training. One of my classes was covers 7 habits of highly effective people. Yeah, this was in the 1990s. Anyway, there was a notorious nurse manager Karen working there and everyone knew who she was and her reputation as an awful human being. And we are talking about a system with several thousand employees and affiliated physicians. She would degrade her nurses and staff and publicly tear apart the administrators. Her own boss was terrified of her and pretty much left her alone to run her reign of terror. So, yeah, she signs up for the 7 Habits course after the CEO finally tells her to take the course or get fired. When my partner trainer and I saw her name on the sign-up sheet, we both felt like quitting on the spot. 7 Habits is very introspective, and we start out with an exercise where you imagine yourself at your own funeral and you write down what you'd want people to say about you. She didn't do the exercise. Just sat in her chair after the first class was over. It was something like 1 or 2 classes a week spread out over 6 weeks. This Karen stays after the class and starts talking with my partner. I guess she preferred talking with another female. Anyway, after a few minutes she starts breaking down and just sobbing. She starts bawling about how she knows that she's a horrible person and she hates herself and what she has become. She has no friends and her kids hate her. It was so bad that I even started to cry. Yeah, I was eavesdropping. Karen said she couldn't do the funeral exercise because she didn't think anyone would even come to her funeral, even her own children. From that point on, she changed. A complete 360-degree course correction. I've never seen anything like it before or since. Honestly, it was just like Ebenezer Scrooge on Christmas Day. Over the next few weeks and months, she apologized to tons of people and became a real nice person. A year or 2 later, when I left this hospital system, she was still the nicest non-Karen ever. Sometimes I wonder how she's doing today. My mom is a black Karen. Someone who really overly states things about others and constantly gets into fights with people when speaking with the said manager. I always apologize after she gets done with people and immediately apologizes for the treatment she's done to others. To the point where teachers and administration in my school completely know who I am and what my family consists of. Car salesmen love her. Men adore her and her very direct manner. She knows how to fight. She knows how to delegate conversations. She completely is a superhero, if I ever saw one, and at times, when I'm at my angriest, and I really despise her behavior, I know she does it, because she loves me. The problem is, that it's actually helpful, and she does a magnificent job helping others out, when it's her kids. She's a fantastic mother who just simply lacks social awareness due to her shitty childhood and her religious family who pretty much tells her to go to church whenever she's sad. I don't think she actually understands how people work in reality. Whenever we did bad she blames it on an evil spirit during her lectures and her beatings for us. Before I did completely opts out of my post, please note, I'm black. Black parents typically beat their kids. Some black parents do not, and I honestly say good for you. You're great. You know how to handle your child. But my childhood literally was my mother completely using coupons and knocking people down to the ground verbally in conversation. I don't know what you'd call a male Karen, but my father was, and still one to the core point. No matter where we went, unless he was accompanied by his business associates, he'd find a thing to complain about, and he'd make sure that the people in charge were aware that he had a problem. One memory that sticks out for me was when we went to buy a laptop, which was something I was getting for graduating, and the worker presumably misclicked something. And the price ringed up was $1 more than what it should have been. My dad went off on her, yelling and screaming about how she's trying to rip him off. She's incompetent, etc. After that episode, the relatively minute issue of $1 extra on a laptop was sorted out, and before he left, he couldn't help but make snide comments to the manager about how he needs to train his employees better. I stayed at the store for a bit whilst he huffed off, as I had to redo my laces, and the small interaction I had with the manager in that time stuck with me. Was that your uncle? Nah, that was my dad. I'm so sorry to hear that. It's Not very often you hear words of pity because you have a shitty parent, but every time it happens, you don't forget it. Side note, I ended up having to pay my dad back the cost of the laptop because it's a life lesson. I know the only reason my mum is still with him is for the money, and as terrible as it sounds, that's about all he's good for as a person. I could say more, but it'd take too long. My mom was a total Karen. She would just say what we were all thinking, to be honest. So many instances stand out in my mind. I remember one time in some department store a bunch of employees were just standing around talking while there was a big line of customers waiting for help. My mom laid into them, "Hey, are you guys going to help us, or do I need to get the manager out here to do your jobs?" We were circling a crowded parking lot looking for a spot and followed this woman to her car. Lady gets in her car but doesn't leave. She proceeds to turn on the engine, buckle her belt, and get on her phone. We waited for about 3 minutes before my mom goes, "Fine, she doesn't want to leave. She's not going to leave." Pulls her car up an inch from this lady's bumper and just lays on the horn. Honk. Lady looks up in her rear view and my mom gives her that Karen "what the hell do you think you're doing" wave. Sometimes she'd lay into people who didn't deserve. For some reason TV screens at the checkout lines of supermarkets bothered her, and she would make sure the cashier would get an earful about it. One time in the parking lot of Costco, some guy in a truck almost ran her over. Apparently this guy was this big, giant, tattooed guy in a large, lifted truck, and my mom just cursed him out for driving like a maniac. The guy backed up and apparently spit at her. None of us were there, otherwise I'm sure the cops would have been called. My mom was pretty feisty, for sure, but she cared for a lot of people. She died last September, and I miss her every day. My dad was a real Karen, but he was also abusive. I remember we were at one of those fake Mexican restaurants. It was late, so I was assuming most of their food was low, since they were about to close. My dad yelled at the poor cashier for the 20 minutes, even though she had no control of what was going on in the kitchen. He was yelling at her because there was not enough beans in the black beans, and it was mostly just water. Keep in mind this was after we had finished our meal. He also kept coming up with other excuses as to why our food wasn't good, how the chicken was undercooked and whatnot. Manager had to come in, offered him a fresh batch of black beans, but he was upset since our dinner was ruined, and he demanded the whole thing to be remade to go. My mom was really embarrassed and took us out to the car, but I remember as we were leaving other co-workers started yelling back at my dad for yelling and insulting all of them for being colored. "Mate, it's a restaurant and they don't get paid enough." They were about to close, but my dad ended up getting another full $35 order meal. They had to make that sheet for us fresh, and it took an hour more after my dad had argued with them. As someone who works in the restaurant industry as a line cook, that sheet would piss me off. You know what was worse? Him taking the meal home and using it as his lunch and dinner for the next day. Needless to say, I absolutely hated my father and I feel bad for my mother who still lived with him. He had disowned me, even though CPS was involved, and he also had a long 4-hour discussion with them about religion, and how I'm atheist and a sinner, and he went into depth about my own personal problems, and how it was all my fault. My mother by all means is a Karen of another level, so utterly toxic we've had to cut her and my stepdad out of our lives. Haircut. Yup, will take any possible slight as an offense and more than happy starting a fight. Teamed up with her husband, stepdad pose, to bang both my husband, over 4 years now, and ban my sister's boyfriend, 6 years dating, from their house because of these imaginary slights they have concocted. They actually had the nerve to call me and talk to me for an hour about how I should leave my husband and how I just don't seem happy anymore. Happiest I've been in years. Bad depression growing up. With him sitting next to me on the couch listening, which they knew. They will openly talk shit about my sister in the same room as her, just because she's on the phone. I feel bad for all the times I didn't stop that shit outright when she would do it in the past. Divorce my dad, and even though he was working 2 to 3 jobs at a time, just having shit of all luck, never gave him an inch, and would non-stop complain to all the kids about how shitty he was. She never wanted for money, but that $500 from my dad was the most important point. My husband and my siblings with their significant others have become closer through this BS. No one went home for Christmas or Thanksgiving, and it's just a quiet feud. So, not great. My stepmother is a Karen. My dad is miserable, but terrified to leave her, because he doesn't want to lose everything he has. He paid for his house and land, and he loves it enough to continue to put up with it. He spends about 95% of his time catering to her, or going behind her to clean up the messes she makes, while she's in public. Even her doctors don't like dealing with her directly, because she thinks, if she causes enough of a scene she'll get what she wants. She's always fishing for opiates. One thing I have learned from her, and other Karens, is that they're usually married to very nice men who are afraid to leave them for one reason or another. My stepmother, for instance, always threatens to call the police whenever my dad tries to leave. She says she'll tell them my dad is abusive, and with the state of things being what they are whenever there is possible abuse, he is too afraid to take a risk. It makes me doubly mad, because it makes a mockery of true abuse cases. The ironic part is that she's the one who's thrown boiling water in his face because she doesn't allow him to cook in the house and he dared to attempt to make himself a bowl of mac and cheese, and has hit him with phones, brooms, and just about everything else you can think of. The police in the area are aware of her instability, but my dad is still too afraid to take a chance, especially at his age and all that he could lose. Another Karen I know threatens her husband using her health, making him think she'll die without him. And he is such a nice guy, the guilt is enough to keep him there. I imagine if there ever comes a time when it's not, my stepmother used the health thing for a while, she'll resort to more drastic measures to keep her slave point, and, of all the ones I know, they always mask their entitlement and narcissism by saying I'm just assertive. I have an aunt named Karen. I think calling women Karen come from her. Her entitlement is insane. She's far up her own as it's insane. Her reality makes no sense. I worked at a restaurant and went by a nickname. Few people knew my real name. The nickname was on the schedule, so I was the nickname. She asked for me by my given name. The waitress didn't know who I was. She then told my mother I didn't work at my job and tried to convince mom I was lying about working there. My mother told her that my car is in the parking lot while I work. I have work cloths with the restaurant label on them that are dirty with kitchen filth. I have pay stubs from the restaurant that I had money to do things. She's called me from there, that she's eaten in the restaurant with me, and staff has stopped to say hi, that they had met my managers. No, Karen was still skeptical and figured I was lying about working a full-time job. Months later, she demanded I prove myself in front of my entire family at some family gathering. She was yelling at me for proof in a 10 minutes rant. Being the badass rebel that I am, I told her where I worked and what I did with my free time was none of her business. I explained that she wasn't really important enough to even talk to, and that she could just fuck right off. Then she yelled more and died in her face. Eventually my grandmother told her she was an idiot and to shut up, which somehow worked. 4 years after that she would make up stories about injustices I had done to her and tell them to my grandmother. My grandmother would be mad at me, and I'd always start by calling Karen a crazy bitch. She really caused me a lot of grief over the years until my grandparents died, and she started fighting over their property and showing her true colors. Now the family is apologetic to me for not realizing she's a Karen. She's still out there being crazy, causing drama, but I don't hear from her. It's a tremendous pain in the ass, nothing but constant arguing and bickering. She's a neurotic, anxious, do it now, type A personality. She's definitely the drive to 4 different grocery stores and harasses the employees and manager because their stock is low on the specific item she wants person. She's very intelligent, but spiritual and a Facebook doctor, but thinks she's very logical, which she can be when arguing, but it's compartmentalized along with her spirituality. She's very heavy and very diabetic, and it makes her hate herself. I know you're going to make suggestions. She's tried everything but major surgery, and that's next. She started out heavy, and has put on 150 pounds in the last 10 years. It ain't great for our such life, which has basically ended. And yes, she has the haircut and outfit. God knows why. I've pointed it out to her in the Karen memes, and she doesn't like it but recognizes it. She has a lot on her plate and she's very capable, and she takes on a lot, and is constantly swamped. Her anxiety leads her to have to micromanage everything and everyone to make sure that it's being done. I've known that since we started dating 10 years ago, and I acquiesced. She needs that to be comfortable? Fine. I don't, so it works. But her personality has since morphed that into, I have to do everything around here because everyone is an idiot. She should 100% have been a lawyer. Her personality flaws would be a huge asset, and she'd own a firm by now. She insists that her friends and others think she's wonderful, and it's only me that has a problem with her, but her friends and family all know too. She takes over their lives as much. They constantly nod at me in a knowing fashion, or tell me, oh, we know. They do love her. She's a genuinely good and loving person and wants to help, and she takes on everyone's problems to getting done for them, because only she can. But she's a Karen, a straight up yelling, argumentative, this is inexcusable, I want to speak to your manager, everyone's an idiot, and I'll do it myself, do it now, kind of person. And her actually being a manager doesn't help, because she knows better how things should be done. To be fair, she's very good at what she does. Her kid's a pain in the ass who's either a narcissist with odd, or is just an asshole, I can't tell anymore, and has been, since I've known him. He was 7 when I met him, he's 17 now, so it's as bad, but worse. So she's constantly yelling and punishing him, but I can't tell how much of that is her nagging and interference, and how much is his naturally being an asshole. Probably both. Her favorite phrase is I just want what I want the way I want it. I tell her I'm going to have it inscribed on her tombstone when I strangle her, along with, she finally got it. I want to leave a lot of the time. I stay because I love her, and for financial reasons. I try to be calm, but we argue and fight all the time. I admit I lose my temper all the time. We both have huge resentments built up. I've never been in so contentious a relationship. We've been together for 10 years, but have been broken up about 4 of them throughout, once for 3 years. I dated another woman during that time, and we had 3 arguments in 3 years. Ultimately we were too different, and it didn't work out, so it ended, and I went back to Karen, foolishly. We have a lot of love and attraction to one another, at least, we did. It's been a while since we felt that way, so we always got back together months, or in that case, 3 years, after a split. I don't know how long we'll stay together. I have to admit, a lot depends on my own financial situation and mental/emotional stability, as sorry as I'm to say it, but it's true. I'm not here for the money, we are not rich or even well off, and recently there have been a lot of home repairs that have put us in a money hole. It's more just being stable, at least on the surface. Decent home, decent neighborhood, decent extended family life, married, picket fence, etc. I guess we'll see how long we can live together before we kill one another, or we figure it out, or just become one of those very old married couples that stays together for 40 years but can't stand one another. I can't tell you how long I've just wanted to blurt that all out. My grandma is a Karen for sure. So many stories. First off, the local Taco Bell. Obviously, being the Karen she is, she makes her order overly complicated, always. It would be something like a beef and bean burrito, no cheese, no sour cream. Once her order was placed, she would stand between the soda machines and counter, looking through the gap to make sure that the workers make their food to her satisfaction. As soon as the order comes out, she would promptly stand next to the register, not in line, huffing and puffing, until she gets someone's attention. This is when she would place her order for just cheese and sour cream. Cue complaining about charging extra for the sour cream and cheese. By the time she would sit down, her food wouldn't be hot enough to melt the cheese. Obviously, she wouldn't settle for such mediocrity. So of course she would complain again. After 2 incidents where she caused a scene doing this in the restaurant, and another in the drive-thru, they gave us a handful of coupons that literally said it's not you, it's us for any free meal they offer. Anytime we went by Taco Bell after that, she would be like, wanna go get our free food? And I'd pretend not to be hungry, because I was 99% sure any worker who seen those coupons would spit in our food. Sounds dramatic, but still. Another time, at a Checkers, after complaining 3 times about the temperature of her fries, she gets some that are like Still popping grease. Finally satisfied, she asks for those salt packs. Cashier happily obliges, glad to get her out of line, and throws some salt packs in the bag for her. Cue my grandma screaming that her fries were ruined because she doesn't know where those salt packs have been, and now they are in the bag with her food. On 4 different occasions, she has made Walmart employees cry in my presence. One poor girl was helping another customer with some of the more expensive electronics, the ones that are locked up, and my grandma storms up to this unknowing employee and customer to demand help finding some Walmart variety of the Toll House cookies. Since the employee is already helping someone, she calls the manager of the electronics department over. This dude literally spends half an hour looking everywhere for these cookies, like going way over the top. Genuine employee of the year attitude. Anyways, the cookies were out, so the guy suggested the non-store brand version of the cookie. Long story short, grandma is not having it. After a lot of convincing, I get her to drop it. That is until she sees the first employee lady from electronics. So once again she storms up to this lady and proceeds to tell her all the ways she was a complete waste of space and that she isn't getting paid minimum wage to sit on your ass. Of course, girl runs to back of store crying. My all-time favorite though is for sure her screaming from the outdoor patio area that she could taste the brown spots in her guacamole, fresh made in front of her by the way. She swore that the avocados must have been swung around, beaten and bruised to the point they couldn't be sold at the grocery. Even said the very green dip was completely brown. I've still got more stories. Not married, but it's a Karen story. My mom has been in commercial real estate and knows how to negotiate with the best of them. She's super smart and likes to make jewelry. She got into ring settings and made connections with wholesalers to get drastically discounted prices. A guy who was getting married asked my mom to get him an engagement ring. If you know about diamond certifications, the guy went with an EGL diamond. He spent roughly 10k on a ring that retails for 20k. My mom is not a business and does not do refunds or anything like that. She simply connects people and takes a very small commission. Basically does this as favors. The wife of the guy, Karen, not her real name, finds out the ring is not a JIA certification and it isn't worth what her fiancé paid for. She wants a refund. They go back and forth in ML and my mom explains to the woman her fiancé didn't pay for JIA, he chose EGL, and showed her the certificate and his signed invoice/receipt. The both of them eventually meet with my mom and my father, who is a lawyer, and the woman starts over with accusations and demands. My mom doesn't budge. This goes on for over an hour, all the while the woman periodically gets up to go cry in her car. The woman asks for a pre-tax value, and my mom leans in and whispers he didn't pay a faking tax and stared daggers. They leave accomplishing nothing and come to find out she sold her EGL ring for thousands less than they paid for it and spent 15k on a JIA ring that looks exactly the same. The person she sold the EGL ring to sold it for full retail value. I have a friend from university who is a Karen. We grew apart over the years. My wife wound up going to do a master's in her city, so we reconnected. About 15 years since knowing her, I'd not really paid attention to her in year, but it gradually started to become apparent that she was an Obama-hating, Trump-loving, Breitbart and info-sharing nut job point, but super nice whenever politics wasn't on the menu. So despite a bit of Facebook discomfort, and because of the fact that she was the only person we knew in the city, we would grab drinks with her occasionally and roll our eyes a little when she went off on a rant. One day, we were bar crawling in 2 separate cabs, my wife, her husband and I in one cab, Karen and a few others in the other one. Her husband says, "Man, I don't know what to do about Karen. Like, I love her. Our adopted black son loves her, but she is a complete and total wackadoo." We laughed our asses off, but there was no answer we were going to be able to give him that would work. She's the whitest wasp lady who ever Karened, but she has a 6-year-old black son in a US city that has recently gotten international attention for the way the cops treat black residents. She has so many deeply problematic views and opinions. Eventually I started calling her out on her craziest Facebook shares and she ended up blocking me. But I have a buddy who sends screenshots of the craziest stuff, covered as simultaneously a hoax, and she's had to yell at people for standing too close to her in the grocery store. My life is much better since she blocked me. I assume the husband's life kinda sucks. The boy's a faking ray of sunshine, and I hope it never happens, but I think that one day he is going to face some classic American racism, and I have no idea how he is going to be equipped to handle it with a mom who denies the existence of racism in the USA, while simultaneously saying I can't tell you what it is about him, but I hate Obama. I dated a guy who had a Karen for a mom. My boyfriend and I were in high school and we were only allowed to spend time together if it was at their house, and only in the living room. He came over to my house for family movie night once, and his phone was just blowing up during the movie. Eventually we had to pause movie so that he could answer, and we hear his mom yell, "Your location services are off. Turn them on right now. Where even are you?" My mom had a mom-to-mom talk with her and told her she needed to cool it. His mom didn't apologize and pretty much told my mom to not tell her how to parent point. So I'm at their house doing HW and watching TV because that's all we're allowed to do. That weekend they had the bathroom remodeled. She starts yelling at the contractor in front of everyone, including me, that he doesn't know how to do his job. Scam artist, we aren't paying you, blah blah blah. It's awkward and uncomfortable for everyone. Boyfriend's dad calms her down. We all go up, and the new bathroom is breathtakingly beautiful. Just wow. Job well done. She points at a tile on the wall and says, "Look." Confused stares, of course. It's crooked. Oh, yeah, it's a teeny tiny bit crooked. One of a million little tiles meticulously and painstakingly done by hand. When we tried to explain to her that she could have just said, "Hey, this one is crooked and it's gonna drive me absolutely crazy. Can you please fix?" she just did not compute. "But he messed up my bathroom. Blah blah blah. Do you know how much this costs?" My mother is a Karen point. If something takes a bit long at any establishment, she'll loudly complain to herself about things. She's one of those "they should open another register" types. She opens stuff and puts it back open like anybody will buy it like that. Or she'll look at something from a shelf in a store and then just put it down wherever. As a former retail guy, that shit stings. If it takes too long for her to get served anywhere, she has this obnoxious excuse me that she uses. Then she'll ask the obvious clerk or whoever if there's anyone to serve her. Since obviously he's not point, she doesn't steal or trick anybody, but man, will she speak with a manager or work the system to ensure maximum benefit. These shoes don't have a price. Are they free? This was here where the price says $5.99. Don't you think you should give it to me for that price? I don't understand. Why advertise the sale if the item isn't in stock? Can you get another one from the back? She comes from a time where retail was mom and pop, and everyone bent over backwards to retain your business, to prevent big corp from getting foothold, and thinks kids who work at Walmart will do the same. She also believes Best Buy works on commission and therefore lie to you. God forbid if she thinks you slighted her in some way. Anytime we go out I tell her to behave, or I'll jump in the conversation with a thank you or a no problem. Wherever I can point she's not happy unless she has something to complain about. And I get it. They accidentally sent her heart attack meds to an address in Florida where she's never lived, but instead of addressing it as a mistake, no. Now Humana has a conspiracy against her because they don't want her money or something. Or the bus driver who made some kind of offhand comment. So now she's afraid to ride the bus because she's sure he went around to all the bus drivers with a description of her to treat her like sheet point, and you can't tell her anything. She looks at you like you're the alien with 4 heads. Life, you're fabricating this sheet point. My sister and I think something broke years ago because she wasn't such a Karen before, though she did stand up for herself. But geez, going out with her is a job. My wife is a total Karen. She used to be dormant, and then a series of unfortunate events in her life caused her to morph into a Karen, and it's as if she is making up for lost time. Point, she sniffs out any and all inconsistencies, even the trivial ones, in any customer service encounter, and will leverage it to death. We went through 4 mortgage specialists who had given up on us and transferred our file onto a colleague because they couldn't help us. My wife kept threatening to go to the bank's VP because we were never offered the option to pay accelerated bi-weekly, which is something you can change at any time throughout your mortgage, and because they were 2 weeks late debiting out account for the interest adjustment. She spent hours upon hours on the phone giving everyone hell. Why was I never offered the accelerated bi-weekly in the first place? And why won't you take the interest payment on the day you said you would? I want to speak to your manager. You are all incompetent. Honestly, this is just one example of many. It's just the most recent one. The problem for me isn't that she does this while I'm around, cause we sometimes get interesting jerk perks, but that when I know she is giving it to them thick for no valid reason, she gets doubly pissed at me for not meeting her emotional state. It's as if I have to share her outrage at all times, and if I don't then I'm a coward. It has caused many arguments between us, and yes, it has weighed heavy on our marriage. My mom is a Karen. Typically, it's unbearable going anywhere in public, particularly restaurants. Here's a typical scenario. One time we went to a Mexican restaurant and she wanted to order a dish with mole sauce. Both the waiter and I warned her that mole is sort of an acquired taste, and she probably wouldn't like it. She ignores us, orders it anyway, and of course doesn't like it at all. Then she insists that the server not only replace her dinner, but give her the entire meal for free. She insisted on speaking to the manager and everything. I was so embarrassed to be there with her. However, on one occasion her Karen-ness worked in my favor. As a kid, my family and I went to an NBA basketball game. Our tickets were in the nosebleed section, which wasn't great, but who cares, because as a kid you're just thrilled to be there. Unfortunately, someone had spilled chili cheese fries all over one of our seats, and she went to customer service to complain. They said they would clean it up, but she insisted that it was not just spilled food, but that she believed it was vomit on the seats, and would thus be a biological hazard for us to sit on them, even after it had been wiped up. She complained so hard that they literally moved us to floor-side seats. I'll never forget it. It was a Houston Rockets vs. Utah Jazz game in like 1995, and I was inches from Hakeem Olajuwon and Karl Malone. I have a Latin Karen-ness to me due to working in various high-stress customer service positions, most notably retention for a shady internet company, so I do believe that when dealing with customers there is certainly a conduct of service, or at least a strong attempt, to get the customer what they desire, or as close to it as possible. It's how you can turn a no into a sale. Still, if this isn't followed I just generally make a mental note not to return to whatever particular location didn't suit my liking. Like a reasonable human being. Point now, unfortunately, when I had gotten struck with a baby in womb, all of my civility went out the faking window, and I turned into a raging monster. I'm sorry. One time in particular my husband and I were waiting in the drive-thru of a Panda Express. I was bitching about work, starving beyond belief, and sitting in the dead hot summer with a bad case of Prego. Not fun. I asked for all of my food, noodles, rice, chicken, to be put in separate boxes. I know that's weird, but I had a sudden aversion to my food touching. The girl told us no, that's not cost effective. And I lost it. My husband nonchalantly rolled up the window and exited the drive-thru line. I cried. He went to get food inside. It was the most bitter meal I've ever eaten. So, in my opinion now, whatever could be done to remedy the cost effectiveness was tossed out the window the minute she said no. That was not an attempt to help, and while I understand that my particular request was not possible, she could still made an attempt to assist me further to find a solution. Still, I completely recognize that that girl was definitely no more than 16, and my conduct was entirely uncalled for. My husband is a wonderful person, and I adore him so dearly. Again, I'm sorry for what I've been. Well, my sister Karen, her hubby left in September. Her demands and requests are outrageous, and so not fair. He's an awesome father, I should know, as my son's father wasn't in the picture. Her husband was mentally abused on a daily basis, constantly picked at for his weight. Do you really need another piece of pie? Karen is no Sports Illustrated swimsuit model herself. She's been threatening him with all kinds of ridiculous shit, like he's mentally unwell, by Karen's diagnosis, as he had a mom for an alcoholic, and he's always had issues with it that affect their marriage. Lol. He says that's far from the case. It is what it is, and an alcoholic mom doesn't mean her kids are ruined for life, and I agree. Karen is about to be served with court papers and the ex-hubby is going for 50 over 50. He has her recorded WTH, her threatening him with all kinds of lies she plans on telling the courts, so she will win. Karen thinks because she has a master's in teaching that she's Cleopatra or God. And he's just an electrician from a bad part of town and he won't win what he wants. I'm adopted, so Karen and I share no blood, thank God. She traumatized me my entire childhood to the point I just got diagnosed with CDT. Childhood developmental trauma from my therapist because of the evil shit she did and said to me growing up. She used to still put me down as an adult until her hubby came along. I was relieved she stopped picking at me and was doing it to someone else for once. I felt so bad for her hubby since the day they met. Quietly I sit here and pray for Karen's demise. I hope she rots the fuck in the hell that she's created for the both of us. Her ex-hubby is my hero. Fuck the keep up with the Joneses, no it's all images everything. Karen, this person may have another name, starts with a C and ends with a T. Like a lot of people, not married to one, but grew up around one. Both my aunts are them. I remember going on holiday with one because we felt sorry for her, and when we was at this lovely restaurant, the manager ended up serving us because we had been there 4 times in the space of a week, and I think he wanted to deal with the Karen properly. Well, he done everything correctly. Honest, great customer service. The chefs cooked the food amazingly. When the bill came, my aunt noticed that with her bread she had been charged pate, which she had to use and asked to have. It was 20 cents, European. Basically nothing to what the meals cost. So we don't live tipping culture but we always tip so bills arrives, and the manager is taking the money and tips from everyone who except my aunt. In front of the whole restaurant, she demands to know why he charged her for pate. When he told her, she asked for it, and we backed her up. She goes mental. Not only does she refuse to pay the 20 cents, she took it off the tip as well, paying a reduced tip. We get out of there, and she feels smug about herself, and my mother and I, being a grown up, sit her down and tell her that the actions in there was not only wrong, but embarrassing, and if she was so pissed off about the 20 cents, why not just tip them 20 cents less, as she wasn't obligated to pay for it. She argued that she was within her right to pick them up on their mistakes and be compensated. We never returned to that restaurant during the holiday, yet it was the best we'd been to all holiday. My mother forget this sometimes when I tell her I won't be doing a holiday or going anywhere with the family if my aunt is involved. A good friend of mine is married with a European Karen. She definitely has some psychological issues. Emotional, unstable, psychological and mentally abusive towards her husband, codependent. Everything that doesn't fit her copy a stance narrative is just dead wrong, and she gets hysterical when proven wrong. Not really a strong character, you might think. He and she met at random party. She managed to live in at his apartment within 3 months, and he was still recovering from another failed relationship. She was pregnant within a half year. No sheet, no anti-conception, anti-abortion, didn't want condoms and sheet. It all seemed like a very wise adult decision. That sheet was natural was more important than being thoughtful. They were not really ready. Kid turned out okay, besides a narcissistic character. When the kid came, it was pretty much poured in concrete and her behavior worsened, and it became more clear how nuts she was. She has this contradiction thinking, based on beliefs she had copied throughout her life. She doesn't even comprehend the shit that leaves her mouth. Being natural is big value. Being a perfect and normal family is another, which is just matching popular culture and the environment she grew up in. Yet she can't explain her reasoning. There is none. It's just copy paste, and she is unable to think critically or original. She gets hysterical and infuriating aggressive when situations and opinions do not match her preset narrative about natural and normal. Unable to reason, discuss or debate in any meaningful or constructive way, she just gets personal with her husband. She belittles him, make unkind regards, blame him for the situation or some other totally irrelevant situation, or just kicks the man in front of all of his friends. In time another 2 kids came. He made all the money, she just was playing housewife. Respect for that, but she made him do shit she cold easily done. Dividing tasks isn't one of her strong qualities either. Her husband just accepts, trying to stay out of trouble. trying to calm her down in very respectful ways. He himself is close to a obedient and loyal golden retriever with a strong sense of duty to raise the kids well. They have had marriage counseling, close to divorcing a couple of times. I guess he just gives in afraid of the hustle and reprisals. She's faked if the marriage is gone. No formal education, no real job, etc. Yet she doesn't change that much. And the friends, including me, don't wanna drop by anymore. She's too much drama. We only see him when he comes alone to escape the house once in a while. Edit. Long text. Happy that I shared it. My wife is the biggest anti-Karen I've ever met. She mostly treats a bad experience as what it usually is, attributable to something external, and doesn't let it bother her. She's wonderfully friendly to pretty much everyone, regardless of status. Extremely egalitarian. However, she goes out of her way to praise people when warranted. Back in 18, we got stranded in Paris en route from Manchester to the States, and had to wait a few hours before things got sorted out. While a scold of Karens emerged like children of the con, and did their damnedest to squeeze into the full plane, she kept her cool, accepted our fate, and decided, hey, we are still in Paris, and that's pretty cool. The Air France/Delta folks took very good care of us, I'm sure, largely because of my wife's amazing patience. The next day, we ran into the same gate staff while checking in. They remembered us for not being assholes, and got us sorted in a flash. My wife immediately took to Twitter to single them out by name as the team that helped us get on our way home. We also got $1K in Amazon gift cards each, so that didn't hurt. She expertly uses Twitter and heads immediately to the corporate public affairs account whenever she's treated well. She tweets about people, products, service, and even when her away bag got mushed and a dented in corner during a flight, she didn't bitch about it, only raised it as a concern. They sent her a new bag. She's the epitome of an anti-Karen, and I'm so blessed. I think I'm pretty naturally resilient and reasonably unflappable, so between us, our daughter is learning from the best. I always see this stuff way late for whatever reason, and usually just think fuck it, no one will see my reply anyway, but I'll give this one a shot. This Karen idea has really taken hold, and I think that's not a terrible thing by any means. There are some people who seem to love to make others' lives more difficult, and that's an unhealthy way to cope and shouldn't be tolerated. And I can almost guarantee many of these people have been through some terrible shit. Think about why people do what they do. It comes from somewhere. No one wakes up one day and decides, well shit, maybe if I'm an asshole to others it'll make me happy. There was something before that. Maybe their parents were like that, they grew up with that attitude, and felt talked down to, or marginalized their whole lives. Maybe they are abused at home, physically, or mentally. This could be a way some cope with feeling powerless, by being demanding, and pushy themselves to someone who isn't in a position to fight back. They get some sense of balance, some feeling of empowerment of their own. I'm not suggesting it's a good thing to do, but I'd put money on the fact that many Karens have been or are being hurt in some way. I think the easy thing to do is to write these people off as awful or spiteful and move on. And for many that aren't in a position to have that conversation, that's all we can do. But I think if you could sit down and really talk with these folks, we'd all be surprised the shit they've been through. All I know is that having compassion and trying to understand where someone is coming from leads to healing and deeper relationships. It's not as though I'd say a person with a substance use disorder should keep drinking or using, but that the reason they do it isn't to intentionally hurt those they love, and these disorders stem from a deeper place, and that understanding and love go a lot further to solve problems than accusing them of being terrible people. We all cope in our own ways, some more healthy than others, but if we take the time to look for what's really going on, often we see we are not so different. Not married. Thankfully I opened my eyes before we took the next step. First experience of seeing her being full Karen was over a coffee. I had been going to my coffee spot for quite a while before we met, had a great rapport with the employees. One morning she met me up there and ordered both our drinks as I was running behind. I walk in, notice they are fairly busy, and I can see it on her face. I approach her and she's fuming, loudly explaining that she ordered our drinks 10 minutes ago, and people who ordered after her had received theirs. I explained to her our choice of coffee, chai latte with 2 espresso shots, takes quite a bit, and I'm sure the other customers had simple orders. Without even listening to my response, she berates them, saying it is unacceptable to wait this long for a coffee, and it is rude to give other customers who ordered after their drinks first. My face immediately turns red. I'm a very laid back person who spent time in the service industry, and I apologize for her attitude and walk out. Less than a minute later she comes out telling me how I embarrassed her, drinks in hand, and saying I must have a crush on the girls working there. I just grabbed my coffee and took off to work, saying we can chat about this later. Second time we were at our local grocery store. I typically did all the shopping because I enjoy doing it and going through checkout. Again, it was pretty busy and I'm sure the cashier was stressed. I made a few kind remarks, asking how her day was, etc. All goes well. I paid in cash and started loading the bags into the cart. She waited for the change. Well, she accidentally miscounted and was a few dollars short. My ex so started into her about how the machine tells her the change and she doesn't have to think, just needs to grab the right amount back, and it can't be that hard. Again, face turns red, and I apologize for her snarky remarks. We get out to the car and she doesn't even remotely see what she did wrong. This situation was brought up several times in our relationship as an example of how her attitude is just shitty. How it's not fair to people. She sees nothing wrong saying over and over again a cashier's job isn't hard. I lost it. Point. We stayed together for a few months after that. But probably every day I would think about these 2 instances and finally made the call. I couldn't imagine marrying a Karen. It's not who I am or who I want to associate myself with. Point. I'm sure she's out there complaining about food and eating reheated spit. She deserves it. Point. If any of you find yourself thinking on your so's attitude and how it embarrasses you, run. My mom's name is actually Karen. Point. She was emotionally and physically abused toward myself and my 2 brothers when we were kids. The emotional abuse continued into adulthood. Even today I have a hard time believing in myself because I have heard her tell me she believes in me only one time, and it was after I asked her to just say it instead of telling me how dangerous or difficult what I wanted to do was. My nephew is unfortunately subjected to the extremely stressful environment created by her relationship with my older brother, who received the brunt of her physical abuse when we were small. He's recovering but unfortunately has a long way to go. Point. My younger brother is doing alright out on his own, but is very bitter and drinks to excess. I'm afraid it's going to kill him at an early age. My father is the most level-headed and sturdy man I have ever met. He's not perfect, but his patience is astounding. He even still keeps me in check when I react poorly to my mother's behavior these days. She has really put a lot of effort into turning things around, but the ghosts of her past, mainly her 3 sisters and my brothers, keep feeding into a loop that prevents her from truly breaking free. I was lucky. I joined the military when I was 19 and haven't really been back in a permanent way since. Unfortunately, now that I've made a life for myself and have become successful, my brothers are still stuck in the psychological abuse loop so bad that they, especially my younger brother, resent me. Point. I tried telling a story about something I had done last year that I wanted to share with them at Christmas dinner. I wanted to hear what everyone else was doing as well, so I asked the table to tell everyone something they are most proud of that year. My younger brother's response was that he was most proud of himself for not killing me every time I bragged about something. Point. I love my dad. I love my brothers. I love my mom, Karen. I'm afraid I'll never see my brothers truly grow up until they cut her out of their lives or she dies. She treats everyone else as the perpetrator in some plot to ruin her life whenever the slightest inconvenience is thrown her way. Growing up we were too loud, misbehaving, or getting on her nerves. She did do some nice things, but they pale in comparison to my recollection of the nasty and horrible memories I have of being screamed at and jerked around because she couldn't handle small disagreements between boys at young ages. I distinctly remember a moment when she told us all that she wanted to just cut all our little dicks off and make us girls, so yeah, not married to a Karen, but pretty close I guess.